She grew up at Park House on the royal estate at Sandringham. Prince Charles's younger brothers, Andrew and Edward, were frequent visitors to her home. She was sent to Riddlesworth Hall, where the girls were taught good manners.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mrs. Wood. Good morning, Mr. Winter.
Good morning, everyone.
Her time there was marked by initial homesickness, and it also became apparent that Diana was not to excel in the classroom, but she enjoyed sport and was good at it. This proved an unsettling period for the girl away from home, as her parents had decided to divorce, and the resultant fight over custody of the children had a lasting effect on the youngster. Her next school, too, Westheath in Kent, inspired no academic achievements, although she won prizes for her swimming prowess. And here she developed her love of dancing, learning ballet and tap, but any dreams of a professional career evaporated as she grew taller. As Princess of Wales, she made a joke of her school days and her lack of academic success. On a visit to Westheath 10 years later to open a new sports hall named after her former headmistress, she recalled past misdemeanours and the price she had to pay.
My years at Westheath were certainly very happy ones indeed. I made many friends who I often see, and in spite of what Miss Rudge and my other teachers may have thought at the time, I did actually learn something. Though you would never have known by my O-level results. I cannot think of a better and more lasting memento to Miss Rudge's years at the school, both as teacher and headmistress, than this magnificent hall. Perhaps now, when future generations are handed out punishments for talking after lights, pillow fights, and illegal food, they will be told to run 6 times round this hall. It has to be preferable to the lacrosse pitch or weeding the garden, which I became a great expert at.
During her time at Westheath, her father had succeeded to the Spencer earldom and gone to live at Althorp Hall in Northamptonshire. He was married again by now to the former Lady Dartmouth. It was during a weekend house party that Prince Charles and Lady Diana took notice of each other for the first time.
It was 1977. Prince Charles came to stay as a friend of my sister Sarah's at a shoot. We sort of met in a ploughed field.
Well, I remember thinking what a very jolly and amusing and attractive 16-year-old she was. And, I mean, great fun and bouncy and full of life and everything.
Lady Sarah Spencer was one of a number of suitable young ladies Prince Charles had been photographed with. He was the world's most eligible bachelor, a magnet for admiring and aspiring young women. He had a number of girlfriends. The chances of each of marrying the heir to the throne was avidly discussed in the press. One name mentioned more than most was Princess Astrid of Luxembourg, even though she was a Catholic. Then a new name emerged. Lady Di, the name she would be known by throughout the world, by now shared a flat in Kensington with 3 girlfriends. News of her romance came as a shock to them. She'd said she was going out with Charles Renfrew. Baron of Renfrew is one of Prince Charles's titles. They remember her as a good flatmate.
Very generous. A very good friend.
Did you watch TV a lot? Did you have any favourite programmes?
Oh, God. Crossroads?
Did you share that like?
Unfortunately, yes.
She adored children and helped with the children at a kindergarten in Pimlico.
I wanted to teach children, and they said, why not come along? So I first started off doing afternoons, and then I took over the mornings and did whole days. But I only worked 3 days a week at kindergarten, and the other 2 I looked after American baby boy, which nobody seems to realise. It was very special to me.
She's, got pictures of him and always asks about him when she writes.
Oh, she still writes to you?
Yes, which I think is just marvelous of her. I realize how she finds the time to do it is beyond me.
She now faced possibly the most daunting initiation test for would-be members of the royal family, ordeal by the media. Her flat came under siege. She was followed wherever she went. The months between the engagement and the wedding were hectic, often exhilarating, sometimes trying. She had to learn the restrictions of royal life. Never again would she be able to walk quietly down to the shops. Prince Charles had to keep the engagements he'd accepted before the announcement of the engagement, and this meant some separation. Diana had to accept this and do her best to hide her feelings. She also had to master the royal technique of remembering your position and keeping station. All this was very new and strange for her, but she was learning fast. She was a hit with the crowds wherever she went. She especially enjoyed meeting children. She made frequent trips to see her wedding dress being made. Exactly what it would look like became a national obsession. The weeks before the wedding were happy ones. The couple attended many events as wedding fever gripped the nation. The more she attended, the better she coped. Only once did Diana's composure slip. At a polo match, she found the ever-present photographers just too intrusive. She was led away, obviously distressed. She quickly recovered. The couple gave a pre-wedding interview in which Diana recalled the collage which her former pupils had made for her.
I collected it last Friday when I went to the end-of-term party, which I ended up being battered and bruised. And there's so many children crawling on top of me. But they presented me with that and a glass representing young England. It was lovely and really nice.
July the 29th, 1981. Wedding day had arrived at last. In a few hours, St. Paul's Cathedral would become the centre of the world. The revellers were out all night. Today was a national holiday, and they would make the most of it. 750 million people would be watching the ceremony live on television. As dawn came up over London, preparations for the parade were well advanced. Horses were made to get up early. So too were 4,000 policemen who would line the route. They needed to be fed and watered as well. Outside Buckingham Palace and all the way to St. Paul's, the pavements were jammed with well-wishers. And the bands began to play. There were accidents, but in general things went according to plan. Earl Spencer, still recovering from a stroke, was out early.
Very well, thank you. I'd just like to say a word. May I say a word?
Please do.
Yes. The Spencers have, through the centuries, fought for their king and country. Today, Diana is vying to help her country for the rest of her life. She'll be following in the tradition of her ancestors, and she will have at her side the man she loves.
Lady Diana's mother, Mrs. Shand Kidd, had flown in from her home in Australia. It was her big day too. At the palace, the royal procession was ready to move off. crowds waited expectantly at Clarence House, where shortly the bride would emerge. The first glimpse of her was not a moment to miss, despite taller people in front of you. She was still Lady Di, but only just. She was about to become the first English girl in 500 years to marry a Prince of Wales. The eyes of the world were on her, and she knew it. She seemed remarkably free from nerves, at the age of 20, beginning a new and very different life. He said, "You look wonderful." She said, "Wonderful for you." The service was followed by the crowd outside in the sunshine.
I require and charge you both, as you will answer at the dreadful day of judgment when the secrets of all hearts shall be disclosed, that if either of you know any impediment, why ye may not be lawfully joined together in matrimony, ye do now confess it.
It went without a hitch, almost.
I, Diana Frances,
I, Diana Frances,
take thee, Charles Philip Arthur George,
take thee, Philip Charles Arthur George,
to my wedded husband,
to my wedded husband,
to have and to hold,
to have and to hold,
from this day forward,
from this day forward,
according to God's holy law,
according to God's holy law,
and thereto I give thee my troth.
and thereto I give thee my troth.
She was no longer a children's helper. She was the Princess of Wales, married to the heir to the throne. Another chapter in the 1,000-year history of the British royal family had been written. It had been a glorious day, a day of happiness not just for the royal couple, but for millions throughout the land and millions more throughout the world. Prince Charles recalled that day several months later.
Neither of us will ever forget the atmosphere. It was electric, I felt. I know my wife did.
Gibraltar was the starting point for the honeymoon. They made a brief public appearance there before disappearing from sight for 2 weeks. It gave the people of the Rock a chance to express their loyalty, and Diana a chance to adjust to being Princess of Wales. The Royal Yacht Britannia was waiting at the quayside. Also waiting was an army of reporters, photographers and television crews. The main problem was making sure they didn't find out where the honeymooners were going. It was solved. They made a leisurely cruise along the Mediterranean and were not unduly disturbed. They came back relaxed and refreshed, ready for the future. Back to Deeside near Balmoral, where they'd been spotted together for the first time a year ago. And they came back to reporters and photographers.
Madam, how are you enjoying married life?
Highly recommend it.
How do you like to book Balmoral as a place?
Lovely.
Have you cooked a breakfast yet?
I gave you breakfast.
It was right and proper that the Principality should receive the first of many visits she would make as princess. In June 1982, she was on the balcony at Buckingham Palace again after trooping the colour. It had long since been announced she was expecting a baby, and the birth came a few weeks later. Prince Charles emerged every bit the proud father.
Obviously relieved and delighted. It's marvellous. It's rather a grown-up thing, I find. It's rather a shock to my sister. He's in marvellous form.
Does the baby have any hair?
Looks marvellous.
As with all major royal announcements, a notice was posted on the gates of Buckingham Palace. The Prince and Princess allowed a brief glimpse of their baby before driving home well and loved it. For the Princess of Wales, though, and for Prince William, who was exposed briefly to the sunlight of Alice Springs, it was all new and a little bewildering.
This is the Alice Springs School of the Year. So today we have two very special guests in the studio, their Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales. Your Royal Highnesses, may I first welcome both of you to the school.
The couple were able to chat to children hundreds of miles away at the Alice Springs Schools of the Air.
Now for all of our students on air today, good morning, girls and boys. Does Prince William have a favourite toy?
They also went to Ayers Rock, the spectacular symbol of Aboriginal pride standing on its own in the middle of the outback. She wasn't exactly dressed for it, but still climbed a little way up. It was one of the highlights of an extremely successful tour. Next, it was New Zealand and the Maoris. Their style of greeting provided many moments of laughter for both the crowds and the royal couple. But however light-hearted it may have seemed, protocol obliged them to make sure practice made perfect.
But my wife has proved, apart from anything else, that she is as good as the next woman at the art of tonguing. Both our noses will carry many memories of this particular tour to New Zealand.
It was here that Prince William gave his first sustained performance for the cameras. William seemed determined to make a break for it, perhaps because his mother had warned he wasn't likely to perform on cue for the press. It didn't matter, though. The cameras clicked away, and again the press had their story. Balloons greeted them in Canada later that year as the princess continued the process of being introduced to the Commonwealth. The crowds here were just as enthusiastic as the Australians and the New Zealanders had been. One little boy did a Jack-in-the-Box impersonation to plant a kiss on the princess's cheek.
It's just so beautiful. I'm just so privileged. I can't believe I did that.
But she is pretty as you expected her to be.
Oh, prettier than ever. More prettier than ever.
The princess's popularity soon turned into adulation. A new word began to appear in the media's vocabulary, Di-mania. On a trip to America, the crowds neared hysteria, screaming for the princess wherever she went.
Something I don't know, but I'll know that blue. I shook his hand, which was enough for me. I mean, seeing royalty that close up. I mean, that they'd actually, take the time out to come and talk to us. It's just unbelievable. God, it was great. I used the whole roll of film. It was worth it, I swear.
1983 was a spectacular year for the princess, becoming the world's #1 cover girl. She'd grown into her still new role and now carried it off with ease. She was now a fully fledged royal. The princess seemed unintimidated by state occasions with the world's leaders. Here in Indonesia, she politely turned down President Suharto's offer of champagne. But occasionally she showed she was still in awe of her royal status. Why else would she collect a place card with her name on for a souvenir? The royal couple appeared to all the world a perfect match. They seemed totally at ease together in public, and the prince was never slow to sing his wife's praises.
At that time, everybody was saying, good luck, and I hope everything goes well, and how lucky you are to be engaged to such a lovely lady. And my goodness, I was lucky enough to marry her. And we had many messages. It's amazing what ladies do when your back's turned.
The cameras often caught touches of tenderness between them in the earlier days. No matter how publicly occasioned, it seemed that Prince Charles had finally met the girl of his dreams, and they didn't try to conceal their feelings for each other. It appeared that the couple were very much... The Di mania continued. Prince Charles was proud of his wife, but it was now becoming obvious that the crowds wanted to see her more than him. It's been suggested that the prince was caught completely off his guard by this, and that his pride became mixed with a twinge of jealousy. He joked about it in public.
I haven't yet worked out a method of splitting my wife in half. She can do both sides.
And he referred to his wife's popularity again at a banquet in New Zealand.
And I've come to the conclusion that really it would have been far easier to have had two wives. To have covered both sides of the street. And I could have walked down the middle, directing the operation.
But all was not as it seemed. It's since been revealed that the princess was suffering from an eating disorder, bulimia nervosa, a complaint caused by stress. The public glimpsed that something was wrong when she fainted during a visit to an exhibition in Canada. The prince made light of her predicament.
It's really entirely due to the extremely advantageous conditions that pertain in British Columbia, the weather, and the general fertile conditions which have ensured that she's about to have sextuplets, which is really why she fainted. It's not actually true, but there we are.
The children were growing up. William began his first day at school. The princess enjoyed her children and was determined that royal duties should not get in the way of being a good mother. The children didn't always behave in a royal way. This was Harry. It was soon Prince Harry's first day at kindergarten too, and as well as his parents, William was there to give his brother support. The royal wave still needed development. When it came to holidays, it was often the princess who took the children away, whether to a beach in the Caribbean or their first skiing lessons in Cloisters. Both children seemed totally confident in the snow. The princess was carrying out more and more official engagements on her own. Her interests were with the very young and the very old, and those in hospitals and hospices. Sometimes she was called upon to try out equipment herself. This machine tests lung performance. She became more involved with the serious aspects of royal patronage, willing to visit the less fortunate and give them encouragement. She was patron of Turning Point, an organisation that helps the mentally handicapped, as well as people recovering from drug or alcohol addiction. Her most publicised crusade was to dispel fears of contact with AIDS victims. On her many trips to open new wards devoted to the treatment of sufferers, she made a point of shaking hands with and talking to the patients. Drug abuse was another of her concerns. She wanted to be involved in the fight against it and spoke of the problem in Newcastle.
We have a battle on our hands. It has to be waged on two major fronts: prevention and cure. As far as prevention is concerned, parents and teachers are in the front line. As a parent myself, I'm only too aware of the responsibility this implies in terms of the kind of upbringing best suited to encourage the child to say no.
She also showed great concern for the deaf. Her attentiveness at this school was not an act. She could both understand and communicate in signing language, another indication of the seriousness she applied to her role. Her courage and compassion were obvious wherever she went. This was an Indonesian leprosy hospital, where her refusal to worry about close contact with patients was reckoned to have helped change attitudes to the disfiguring disease. She also boosted the morale of the soldiers serving in Northern Ireland. She went to Londonderry to visit the Royal Hampshire Regiment, one of the regiments of which she was Colonel-in-Chief. Even in full combat gear, the Princess managed to look glamorous, providing a welcome relief for the men used to the daily dangers of serving in the troubled province. Although an obvious target herself, the Princess seemed to shrug off any fears. During the time of the Gulf War, she was there to give support to the wives and children of servicemen fighting in the desert. And she chatted to the fighting men who would soon be on their way to take up arms against the Iraqis. She gave great comfort to many during frightening times. And it wasn't only the British troops who idolized her. Out in the sands of Kuwait, the American forces had also made her their pin-up. Her charity work sometimes took her to the movies. This was the premiere of Children of a Lesser God. She and Prince Charles visited the James Bond film set. The premiere of The Living Daylights would be in aid of the Prince's Trust. They were shown one of Bond's secret weapons. The stunt bottles and Prince Charles's head were just too inviting. As early as 1987, rumours about the royal marriage persisted. Prince Charles visited Woodlands in the Duchy of Cornwall on the same day as the Princess presented a pennant to the Hussars in Hampshire. This in itself would have gone unnoticed, but for the fact that it was their 6th wedding anniversary. They reunited briefly in Scotland, but soon the Princess returned to London while he stayed. The couple had spent a month apart when they reunited to visit Welsh flood victims. But after a few hours together, Prince Charles went straight back to Scotland. The rumours about their marriage were now presented as fact. Prince Charles was also accused of lack of concern when his son William was accidentally hit by a golf club and suffered a depressed fracture of the forehead. The Prince chased the ambulance containing his wife and injured son from Berkshire to Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, where his son was to be operated on. Afterwards, to another engagement. It was the Princess who took William home the next day. The Prince was also absent during the Princess's 30th birthday celebrations. The press were now calling the marriage a cause for concern, especially after it was revealed that Prince Charles had apparently offered his wife a party and she had turned it down. But during times of trouble, they were seen to give each other support. They were both on holiday together at Cloisters in 1992, when tragic and unexpected news was delivered to the princess. Her father had died after seeming to recover from a long period of illness. The princess's sorrow was absolute. The funeral was held in the village of Great Brington in Northamptonshire. It was an occasion for private and personal grief, and the princess showed composure and control, isolated during a very public but very sad occasion for her. The publication of Andrew Morton's book caused newspaper headlines throughout the world. He not only asserted that the princess was unhappily married, but claimed that she tried to commit suicide. He called them cries for help. The book was based on evidence supplied by some of the princess's closest friends, and the suspicion lingered that her friends would never talk without her permission. The press went crazy. But the public showed sympathy, so much so that the princess couldn't hold back the tears after an affectionate display of loyalty on her first public appearance after the book's publication. Whether the total truth or not, it was now obvious that something was wrong. In India, she visited the Taj Mahal alone. Her husband was at another function. The press made much of the solo visit, so much so that the prince felt the need to respond.
A wiser prince than I would have opted for a visit to the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort at Agra, which I believe is where some, at least, of the greatest pundits of the press think I ought to be anyway, rather than making a greater fool of myself here.
The princess called her visit a healing experience and told the press to work that one out for themselves. She obviously enjoyed her visit to this temple of love, and the media made much of her seeming unconcerned for her husband's absence. Further fuel was added to the fire when, after a polo match during the same Indian visit, it looked very much as though she deliberately turned away from her husband when he proffered a kiss. And then she undertook a solo official visit to Egypt, posing happily at the pyramids for the assembled paparazzi. By now it had become acceptable to see her alone. The prince had travelled to Egypt with his wife, but then carried on to an archaeological dig in Turkey. She seemed unworried. But she did seem unhappy on their tour to Korea late in 1992. It's thought that during this tour, the couple finally decided to separate. After the formal announcement of their separation, the princess quickly confirmed that her charity work would remain unaffected.
Your patron has never been happier to see you. Whatever uncertainties the last few weeks may have brought, I want you to be certain of this: our work together will continue unchanged, especially now as Christmas brings its own painful stresses to so many people in need. The sick, the old, the handicapped and the homeless, the lonely, the confused and the simply unloved, who are needing your help more than ever.
That specially composed song heralded the princess's arrival in Zimbabwe in July 1993. She first visited the elderly, where a game of bottle-top checkers proved no problem for her.
I think we ought to retire gracefully.
And then it was the turn of the children. The organisers of the tour agreed that among many splendid moments, the best came out in the bush at a feeding station called Nemazuva. It perfectly demonstrated the positive results of this Red Cross enterprise. For these were not the harrowing pictures of starvation commonly associated with poor African countries. The princess's presence guaranteed that messages of success were sent around the world. Back home, she addressed a conference called to discuss eating disorders. Bravely, she confronted her own bulimia in public.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have it on very good authority that the quest for perfection our society demands can leave the individual gasping for breath at every turn. This pressure inevitably extends into the way we look. Eating disorders, whether it be anorexia or bulimia, show how an individual can turn the nourishment of the body into a painful attack on themselves. And they have at their core a far deeper problem than mere vanity.
Her bulimia was no secret anymore, but the press continued to pry into her private life to an alarming degree. There were so-called secretly recorded tapes everywhere. First, Dianagate, allegedly a conversation between the princess and a male companion she called Squidgy. Then Camillagate, allegedly between Charles and his lover. Then the Highgrove tapes, supposedly of arguments between the prince and princess at their country home. The final straw came when a paper published pictures of the princess working out in a gym. This intense media attention eventually pushed her to adopt a lower profile. She decided enough was enough.
I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear. My first priority will continue to be our children, William and Harry, who deserve as much love and care and attention as I am able to give, as well as an appreciation of the tradition into which they were born.
But without the all-encompassing protection of the royal family, it proved impossible for Diana to lead the normal life she desperately craved. Her return to a more public life was marked by an extraordinarily frank interview with BBC's Panorama. She spoke of her past and her hopes for the future.
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country.
She continued to campaign tirelessly for humanitarian causes. Her fame generated huge publicity, and simply by being photographed with the disabled victims of landmines, she ensured those working to remove them won unprecedented support. By now, her fame as an ambassador for good causes was truly international, and she was seen with some of the world's most celebrated figures. At last, she seemed at ease in a role she'd developed for herself and was greeted enthusiastically wherever she went. She was named Humanitarian of the Year in America and mixed with that nation's most powerful and influential figures. But it wasn't always so high-powered. She twice flew to Pakistan to support Imran Khan's cancer hospital, and it was here that a photograph of a caring Diana cradling a sick child was to spark her last and controversial press interview. That photograph inspired the French daily Le Monde, and the interview started another controversy. But her taste for a high-profile lifestyle, this was Gianni Versace's funeral, sometimes sat uneasily in the minds of the British public with the role of mother of the heir to the throne. Her response was to try and escape from the pressures of public life. She said press intrusion was so bad she'd have abandoned Britain years ago if it were not for her sons. It was her friendship and holidays with Dodi Fayed that ensured that the last few weeks of her life were lived, as they'd always been, never far from the spotlight. Diana's life was not the fairy tale that everyone expected. But from shy-die to one of the most photographed women in the world, she at last found an inner confidence, and with it, some say happiness. Without doubt, she became one of Britain's most influential and dazzling ambassadors.
Carol Barnes' personal appreciation of the life of Diana, Princess of Wales. Now, a reminder that we've broken into the usual ITV schedules.
It turned and hit a pillar. Dodi Fayed died instantly in the back seat. The driver was also killed. The princess, who'd been sitting alongside Dodi Fayed, suffered terrible chest injuries. At first, ambulance crews managed to keep her alive, but her heart had stopped beating by the time she was admitted to hospital. For 2 hours, surgeons fought to restart her heart. At 4 a.m. Paris time, they admitted defeat. Britain's ambassador had been at her bedside.
The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends.
Near the scene of the accident, French police officers examine motorcycles allegedly used by photographers to chase the princess's car. The men who'd been riding them are still being held for questioning. The princess and Dodi Fayed had dined at the Ritz Hotel, owned by the Al Fayed family. This was the route their driver took to escape the photographer's attention. As the road enters the tunnel, there's a sharp bend and a dip. This is where he lost control.
The car was just travelling at such speed, and it was almost as if it was in too high a gear. It really, really was tearing away. I don't know, maybe it was doing at least 80, maybe 100 miles an hour.
This morning, with the underpass reopened to traffic, police were still trying to piece together the last moments of what had been a romantic holiday for the princess and her friend. At the Salpêtrière Hospital, hundreds of ordinary people have been leaving flowers in memory of the princess.
Oh, Diana, why?
This distraught woman said the Princess of Wales had been her heroine ever since the day they'd met while she was on an exchange trip working at a charity in South London. The police say that charges will be brought against 4 men over the events that led up to last night's accident. They're treating the 3 deaths as possible manslaughter. Paul Davis, ITN, Paris.
Well, live to Paris now, and our reporter there, Robert Hall. Robert, we've just been seeing some pictures there from the scene of the accident in that tunnel. What is the latest you have on the police investigation?
Well, they're keeping very quiet about progress so far. Obviously, everybody's waiting to hear whether or not anybody will be charged. They had 7 photographers in custody originally, 6 of them French, 1 of them Macedonian. They've since released 3 of them. They're still holding 4, but we have no confirmation as to whether any or all of those 4 will face any sort of charge. There was speculation they might face a charge of manslaughter, but as I say, the police are not confirming it. They're simply hinting that there might be a statement later today.
Robert, have you any information on the whereabouts of Prince Charles and Princess Diana's 2 sisters? They left Britain at about 2:10. Are they in Paris yet?
Not quite yet. We expect them to land at a military airport just outside Paris at about 5 o'clock. They'll then travel into us by motorcade, as will President Chirac. They'll sweep in through the hospital gates behind me. There'll be a brief photo call with President Chirac, a meeting outside. They'll then go in for a series of private meetings, particularly one with hospital staff who worked so hard for hours this morning to try and restore the princess to life. The prince and the coffin and Princess Diana's sisters will emerge to an honour guard. They'll then travel back to the military airport and fly out to Britain, arriving at RAF Northolt, just outside London, early this evening.
And presumably, Robert, there are some formalities to be dealt with at the hospital.
Well, I think it's all being done as quickly and, if you like, as easily as possible. The idea is that this part of it is done very privately, it's very personal. The Prince has some personal things to say to the staff at the hospital, and I'm sure the French President will have some very personal words of condolence to say to the Prince and indeed to pass those condolences on to his family. I think the idea is to keep the ceremonial to a minimum, to pay respects, and for the Princess's body to be returned home as quickly as possible.
Robert Hall in Paris, thank you very much. Well, here the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, led tributes from every corner of the globe to Diana, Princess of Wales. He said he was devastated at the news that such a wonderful, warm and compassionate person had been lost. The Archbishop of Canterbury also spoke warmly of the Princess, saying she was a vibrant and beautiful woman, marked by her passion and commitment to people. Andrew Simmons reports.
Expressions of shock and grief have swept Britain. One by one, they laid flowers at Buckingham Palace. All generations, each with their own personal gesture of sadness. It was the Prime Minister who tried to sum up the mood of the nation.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her two sons, the two boys.
She was a unique figure. She was a very lively and attractive individual, but also she was a unique public figure. And I think we should all recognize this morning that she did a great deal of good. We should pay tribute to the tremendous work that she did.
Britain had awoken with disbelief. The suddenness and scale of this tragedy hard to absorb. Flags across Britain were at half-mast. People were numbed by an immense sense of loss. But the early morning newsstands brought tragic confirmation.
It's a shock, really, yeah. I don't really know what else to say. It's just pure shock, I think.
She was such a wonderful, warm person, and I think she stood head and shoulders above the rest of the royal family because in the way that she was a real human being. She cared about all these people, and that is why I'm so upset about it.
I'm just devastated. I mean, we're the general public. I'm just, you know, it's just heartbreaking how her kids must be feeling right now.
She was a great lady. The world will never be the same without her again.
In Manchester, the Archbishop of Canterbury lit a candle for the Princess.
I think everyone is stunned by the terrible news of the death of Diana. She was loved by so many people, and I think there was in this remarkable, young, very attractive woman a combination of the ordinary and the extraordinary. The ordinary is the way in which she seemed so like us, and the extraordinary was her ability to touch the lives of so many people, to bring grace into their lives and to somehow express the human face of the royal family, which is we know is very human indeed, and somehow she was a remarkable person in her own right.
On this most solemn of Sundays, the people of Britain are expressing their sorrow, sometimes in the smallest of ways, but together it's an overwhelming show of grief for the woman they called the People's Princess. Andrew Simmons, ITN.
Well, within the last hour, the American President Bill Clinton has paid a personal tribute to Diana, Princess of Wales. He said she was someone whose good deeds he admired very much. He especially praised her personal crusade against anti-personnel landmines. From Washington, John Irvine reports.
A short time ago, a somber President Clinton appeared before the television cameras to pay tribute to Princess Diana. She had been a friend to both him and the First Lady.
Let me say again how very sad Hillary and I are about the terrible accident that has taken the life of Princess Diana and the others who were with her. We liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS, for the cause of ending the scourge of landmines in the world, and for her love for her children, William and Harry. And I know that this is a very difficult time for millions of people in the United Kingdom who are deeply shocked and grieving. And the American people send their condolences to all of them, and we value their friendship, and we understand this great and painful experience.
At the British Embassy in Washington today, there is evidence of the great sense of loss being felt across America.
Diana, the Princess of Wales, is dead. She was killed early.
Throughout the night, the television networks here rescheduled programs to report the Paris tragedy. Sophisticated yet possessing the common touch, she charmed the people of this nation. Diana's most recent visit in June was to call for a worldwide ban on landmines. Privately, she met Hillary Clinton, who later admitted that the meeting caused the president to reconsider the landmine issue. Other politicians who met the princess were also impressed by her commitment to humanitarian causes.
I knew her as a very sensitive, at times very amusing lady who desperately desperately wanted to make a difference in this world.
Humanitarian work.
One of the princess's last interviews was with this French journalist who writes for Le Monde. Diana was critical about British press intrusion.
Said, really, the British press is so hard. Anything I do, I'm criticized. They are always looking for the tiny mistake. And I think that when I come abroad or overseas, it's more simple, and people tend to take me just as I am.
It was that down-to-earth personality that appealed to the many Americans devastated by the princess's death.
It was a great shock. I can't believe that it happened.
That's bad news. I didn't know.
Princess Diana was a frequent visitor to the United States, and her fondness for Americans was reciprocated completely. Britain does not mourn alone. John Irvine, ITN, Washington.
Well, our royal correspondent Nicholas Owen is with me in the studio now. Nicholas, we've just been listening to John Irvine's report there from the United States. They, of course, went through the immense shock of the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963.
Yes.
Is this event, in some senses, of similar magnitude?
Well, those of us old enough to remember the death of President Kennedy, and of which I am one, that was a seismic thing, and everyone said we all remember where we were when we heard about that. I have a suspicion that this might just be even more horrifically remembered by the world. I say that because, quite simply, the Princess of Wales, Diana, Princess of Wales, was the most famous person in the world. People all over the world knew who she was. And so I think her very fame will ensure that this sends shockwaves everywhere. It will be the sort of event that will again have people saying, oh yes, I remember that day, I woke up, I saw it on the television, I heard it on the radio, somebody told me about it in the street. Those of us over the age of, I don't know, about 5 or 6 will remember this day for the rest of our lives with a terrific sense of pain, I think.
We saw in Carol Barnes' report a bit earlier there the great outpouring, public outpouring of joy in 1981, all those wonderful memories of the royal marriage. Now are we in for a period of loss, guilt, mourning?
I think absolutely. I mean, we've already got 1 or 2 sort of psychological experts, no one plays too much regard on what they say, but they've already been quoted as saying, yes, we're all going to feel a bit like that, and there's going to be an awful lot of anger. But I think that's the point, isn't it? The guilt. We've talked a bit about this business of the paparazzi involved in this sort of thing. So many people angry about their activities, but again, if people weren't keen to see the results of the paparazzi's work, then the paparazzi wouldn't have a market and the problem wouldn't exist. So, yeah, I think everybody's going to feel that everybody's going to be thinking a little bit about their own reaction to Diana. This is always the thing, isn't it? She was the sort of woman who, I think it was the Archbishop of Canterbury said, she was an ordinary person in some way. Not an ordinary person, but we could all relate to her. I think that's what he was trying to get at. And yet she was, like ordinary people, there were so many sides to her character. She could be charming and wonderful, and we saw so much evidence of that. She could be very she could change her mind very quickly. She fell out with her staff. An awful lot of her staff left her service. So there was lots of different sides to the princess. She wasn't an easy lady. She'd not had an easy life, of course.
We've talked about the public anger, particularly directed at the paparazzi. Is there any way, though, in which some of that anger may be directed at elements of the royal family, the establishment that froze her out?
I think so. I think so. People will say, well, that she ended her life hounded by the paparazzi, but how did that all begin? It all began because she entered a loveless marriage, as far as one now understands it. I mean, I personally think the participants at the time didn't see it like that. I'm not sure they did anyway. There was an awful quotation that's run so often of Charles saying he was asked, are you two in love? They sat on, that young engaged couple sat there, and he said, oh yes, whatever love is. Now, he's been sort of much reviled for that, but I think quite a lot of people will say, well, I know what he's getting at. When you're getting married, it's not always a certain thing. Anyway, disaster followed in that sense. So that was, life had got very difficult for her right from the start. So people will say, if she hadn't been involved with the House of Windsor in the first place, the tragic events wouldn't have followed.
Nick, thanks very much indeed. Let's cross now to Buckingham Palace. Our reporter Harry Smith is there. Harry, is there evidence there of people's reactions, these feelings of guilt and anger that we've been talking about here?
I think there's probably evidence of both.
I think the overwhelming impression you get if you wander around down here is one of sorrow, one of sadness, one of shock. As you can possibly see, there's still a large crowd here. They've been coming here since before dawn, and they're still arriving. The biggest concentration of the crowd, as you may be able to see, is just in front of that, the main gate in front of Buckingham Palace. There's an area there which the police have set aside. They've put up barriers to keep back most of the crowd, but there is a corridor through those barriers where the police are allowing people to come through and lay flowers. Hundreds of people have been bringing flowers. Some tourists have bought a single rose and come down. Others have arrived with large handfuls of flowers. They're allowed through this corridor. They're allowed to lay their tributes in front of the main gate, to pause for a while. We've seen some tears, and then file off. But there's also a sense of anger. People have been confronting one or two photographers and saying, it's your kind that are to blame. The photographers have been trying to step back and not get involved. There's been no scuffles or anything like that. But there is, in pockets of this crowd, a mood of anger as well as one of very deep sorrow.
Harry, is there the prospect of any kind of announcement there or anything like that? Or are people just coming to Buckingham Palace because they want to be there? They feel that's the place to be today?
I think that's exactly why they're coming, because remember, this isn't even or wasn't the official residence of the Princess of Wales, and yet people see Buckingham Palace as the home of royalty. She was the most popular member of that royal family, a very popular member. Walk among the crowd and everyone will tell you why they liked the Princess of Wales. They're coming here partly because there is a crowd, partly to see what's happening, to see if there's any information, partly, as I said, to pay their own tributes to the Princess of Wales. There'll be no announcement as such from Buckingham Palace. I don't know if you can see that there isn't even a flag flying from Buckingham Palace today because, of course, the Queen is not in residence. There's no flag flying, no flag at half-mast. But if you look around from here, look at the roofs of government buildings all the way down Whitehall, you can see the Union flags flying at half-mast. The announcements will come from elsewhere, but as far as a great many people from Britain and abroad are concerned, this is where they want to be today, just to be close to pay tribute to the Princess of Wales.
And Harry, what about the police who are regularly on duty there? What about the soldiers around?
The soldiers have been here as usual. They've been trying as far as they can to carry on duties as normal. We've had the changing of the guard, which always attracts hundreds of people to Buckingham Palace on a Sunday. It went ahead, as it usually does, with one important difference, that the band today played a very moving lament. And it's an event, the changing of the guard, usually watched with some sense of excitement, a bit of theatre. Today, during that ceremony, there was silence. People just stood still. Even those who didn't speak the language and perhaps didn't know what was happening in detail, they caught the mood of the music, they caught the mood of the crowd. So it's been, as far as they can, business as usual, but this is in no sense a normal day at Buckingham Palace.
Harry Smith at Buckingham Palace, thank you very much. Well, Nicholas Owen with me in the studio. I believe you have some news of new developments concerning the funeral.
It was something that Harry Smith said that reminded me that we have heard a little, not an awful lot, I have to say, from royal officials this afternoon, but one of them did say that when Diana's body arrives back in Britain, it will be taken to a private mortuary at an undisclosed destination. But the point was also made that funeral arrangements are expected to be announced by tomorrow at the latest. Now, the suggestion here is that we are looking at obviously a major national event. Now, whether that's going to involve Westminster Abbey and then interment at Windsor, or whether the Princess's body will finally lay at her family seat in Northamptonshire in the Midlands, I don't know. But anyway, that's obviously going to be the next and very, very important thing that people will be taking notice of.
I mean, presumably this is taking some time because there are quite a lot of people to consult.
Oh, immense numbers of people to consult. And the other thing you have to bear in mind is that when it comes to very senior members of the royal family, old members of the royal family, older people, you know, we all know how life ends up. So, of course, lots of plans are laid. Military precision, there's no secret about that. It would be foolish to pretend otherwise. But when it comes to the young ones, well, the Princess was 36 years old, in the prime of health, and, you know, I very much doubt whether there is much of a plan anywhere for this, and so things have got to be put together and will be put together. This will be a most moving occasion in every sense. The next few days will be handled superbly by those who have to do these things, but it is all being arranged very, very quickly at the last minute.
OK, Nick, thank you very much. Let's move the story on now. French police confirmed this afternoon they were questioning 7 photographers about the crash in which the Princess and Dodi Fayed died. It's not yet clear whether any of them will be charged in connection with the incident. It was the kind of hounding she'd been forced to get used to, but had often resented, not least in recent weeks, as her friendship with Dodi Fayed flourished. Jennifer Nadel now examines the Princess's relationship with the press and looks at what repercussions their apparent role in her death will have.
For the last 17 years, the Princess's every move has been tracked and recorded by the press. Whether trying to take her sons on a family holiday or simply work out in her London gym, photographers and editors alike knew her face, and the fairy tale that went with it would sell. Photos taken on her recent trip to Saint-Tropez were sold for hundreds of thousands of pounds, boosting tabloid sales and profits. Now her pursuers stand accused.
Mr. Al-Fayed believes that this appalling tragedy would never have happened but for the attentions of these people who I suppose we shall have to call photographers. It was quite appalling what happened, and we're just coming to terms with that.
Tougher laws which could have afforded the Princess greater protection were recently rejected. Until now, the government has favoured self-regulation, a position that may change.
I think there has been concern in Britain, in the press and the media, that there should be a line drawn and that it should be drawn by a responsible press and by responsible media, rather than having it drawn for them by others, with the development of a stronger press complaint system. And I'm certain that that is the right way to go. The paparazzi clearly wouldn't have been pursuing her were it not for the fact that the photographs that she, of her that they took earned so much money for them.
Editors also think legislation wouldn't have helped.
France has very stringent privacy laws. They were completely ineffective, both at Saint-Tropez and clearly in Paris. The story about the Prince of Wales, the story about the breakup of the royal marriage, was a worldwide story. It had huge market potential in every country in the world. Even if you banned it in one country, the market would still be sufficiently great to ensure that the harassment continued.
But at Buckingham Palace today, some mourners clearly wanted someone to be held accountable.
But why do they pay so much money for the photographs? Why were the paparazzi after them? If there was no money, in the photographs, they wouldn't have been after her in the tunnel.
Whatever the difficulties of legislation, public anger and grief now seem certain to lead to increased pressure for changes to the law. Jennifer Nadel, ITN.
Well, Princess Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, reacted with grief and real anger to the news of his sister's death. This is what he said earlier today.
All those who've come into contact with Diana, particularly over the past 17 years, will share my family's grief. She was unique. She understood the most precious needs of human beings, particularly those that suffered. And her vibrancy and sparkle, combined with a very real sense of duty, are now gone forever. It is heartbreaking to lose such a human being, especially when she was only 36. This is not a time for recriminations, but for sadness. However, I would say that I always believed the press would kill her in the end. But not even I could imagine that they would take such a direct hand in her death, as seems to be the case. It would appear that every proprietor and editor of every publication that has paid for intrusive and exploitative photographs of her, encouraging greedy and ruthless individuals to risk everything in pursuit of Diana's image, has blood on his hands today. My heart goes out to the families of the others killed in this incident. Above all, my thoughts are with William and Harry, and with my mother and 2 sisters, who are showing tremendous bravery in the face of senseless tragedy. I would ask you please, at this time, to respect the fact that Diana was part of a family, and amongst the general mourning at her death, realise that we too need space to pay our final respects to our own flesh and blood. For that, we will need privacy. Finally, the one consolation is that Diana is now in a place where no human being can ever touch her again. I pray that she rests in peace. Thank you.
Some very tough words there from Earl Spencer, Princess Diana's brother. Well, we across now to Washington and our correspondent there, John Irvine. John, what are they saying over there about the princess's treatment at the hands of the European press?
Well, Dermot, firstly, if I could just begin, we're hearing reports here that Hillary Clinton will be attending the princess's funeral. Those reports are unconfirmed at this stage, I have to say. If I can bring you back to President Clinton's statement at Martha's Vineyard, he also went on to say, "For myself, I will always be glad that I knew the princess and always think of her in a very strong and positive light." Responding to a question about press intrusion and privacy, President Clinton said, "I think it is better right now if we let a little time pass. Let this event and the people involved be honoured and grieved." Now, going back regarding the reaction of the American people in general, the British Embassy here in Washington has issued a statement saying, "We are deeply touched by the many messages of condolence received from all over the United States."
That announcement that Hillary Clinton is going to attend the funeral, is that a sign of the kind of close relationship that the two women had formed?
Very much so. When Princess Diana was here in June, she had a private meeting at the White House with Hillary Clinton. The two women were close. President Clinton was, of course, speaking for an entire nation, a nation that was in love with Princess Diana. Before she came on the scene, the royal family was regarded as somewhat aloof, perhaps even somewhat anachronistic. She changed all that. She was, of course, a regal figure here. She was elegant, statuesque, but she also possessed that great human quality. She was down to earth. She could empathize with people from many walks of life. Now, the idolatry, the way they adored her here was unquestioning. There was no doubts about Diana here. There was never any suggestion that she was out to exploit or manipulate the media in any way. There was no skepticism about what she did for humanitarian causes. People here saw her as a genuine person, a celebrity who used that celebrity, her contacts, to try to do good in the world.
Now, John, you watched that statement from Bill Clinton in its entirety. Would you say he was genuinely shaken?
Very much so. The entire country is genuinely shaken. Such was the adoration for this woman. You and Nick Owen were talking a short time ago about the assassination of President Kennedy. Many people, many Americans, in the same light as President Kennedy's widow, Jackie, a glamorous woman with a common touch, and yet also a tragic figure. Anytime the princess came to the United States, she was embraced by a people that had great sympathy for her, a people who didn't quite understand why she came under such flack from the press in Britain. There were, of course, many Americans who hoped and wished that if she chose to leave Britain, she would come and settle here in the United States.
John Irvine in Washington, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's just discuss this issue of press intrusion a little further with Nicholas Owen with me in the studio here. Nick, press intrusion very much to the forefront of this tragedy. There's been a new development on
yes, we're getting a word here that, I mean, we don't know how much credence to place on this, but let's tell you what the wire says. Pictures of Princess Diana entangled in the wreckage of that crash are being offered around the world for over £600,000. This is quoting a man called Steve Coz, who's editor of the American supermarket tabloid The National Enquirer. The News of the World also says, that's the newspaper here, of course, that a French photographer is trying to sell pictures of Diana trapped in the car for £200,000. Mr. Coz particularly is saying he urges the world's press to join the Enquirer in boycotting publication of the pictures. Well, this is a frightful thing. Now, maybe it won't turn out to be quite the case. There's a lot of money and nonsense gets talked in this field, but this goes to the heart of what we've just been talking about, what John's been talking about, what we heard Simon Jenkins saying earlier on. The market, the rewards are so great that reason and decency get thrown to the winds, and that sounds like to me like the most ghastly example of it.
This would be the real test, though, wouldn't it? I mean, if any paper, magazine, anywhere in the world dared to print pictures like that, if they exist, surely there would be universal revulsion.
Yes, I can't. It's very, very hard to imagine that anybody would publish them, but human nature being what it is, I wouldn't like to take an absolute bet on that, Dermot, to be quite honest. We don't know any more than that, but it is Mr. Coles of the News of the World claiming that there are photographs available.
OK, well, we'll have more on that if we get it. Well, the Queen and the Prince of Wales were woken in the early hours of the morning at Balmoral with the terrible news of the Princess's death. Determined to cling together, the whole royal family, including Princes William and Harry, attended a church service there a few hours later. Shortly afterwards, Prince Charles set off on his trip to Paris to accompany Diana's body back to Britain. Our reporter David Rose has spent the day at Balmoral.
Balmoral Castle, where the dreadful news arrived in the small hours of this morning. Balmoral Castle, where sometime around 4, the heir to the throne had to wake his 2 sons and break the news that their beloved mother was dead. The media and the police started gathering at the entrance to the castle, hardly believing what they'd heard. And then tourists, foreign and British, who came to see the royal family and to pay their respects. Promptly at 11:30, 3 royal black limousines swept quietly across the River Dee from the castle, down the drive. The Queen Mother was in the first car. Prince Charles and Princes William and Harry were in the second. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh in the last. They crossed the main road and drove up the hill, disappearing under the trees to Crathy Church. In the church, the service never mentioned Princess Diana by name, but the minister offered prayers for all those whose lives had been darkened by tragedy and grief. Then, after an hour of worship and prayer, the cars came back from the little church on the hill. The 2 princes were sitting on either side of their father in the back of the car. Afterwards, the Queen's domestic chaplain spoke about the service.
We prayed for the royal family, as we always do every Sunday, but today especially we prayed for the Prince of Wales and for the children in particular, and asked that God's blessing would be with them, and that they would know his peace, and that they would know not only of God's love, but our love.
Just 3/4 of an hour after the service, 2 much smaller cars drove out of the castle. The Prince of Wales was at the wheel of the first, special branch officers beside him and in the car behind. The Prince drove 50 miles straight to Dyce Airport just north of Aberdeen, where a plane of the Royal Squadron was waiting. That took off immediately on the flight to Paris. The Prince would have 3 hours to compose himself for what lay ahead. At this moment, the whole royal family, with the exception of Prince Charles, are in Balmoral Castle behind me. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh and the 2 princes are expected to make their way south later today, but so far we have no details. David Rose, ITN, at Balmoral.
Well, live now to David Rose at Balmoral. David, we know about Prince Charles going to Paris. We heard you talking there about the 2 young princes. Any news of any other royal movements?
No news, but I think we can gather at least 2 things for sure. One, there was a huge police and special branch presence earlier today when the royal family went to church. There are no police, or virtually none, around at the moment. Therefore, I think a departure is not imminent. Secondly, I'm sure what will decide how they move, when they move, is the benefit, what are the needs of the 2 young princes. And one rumour, and it seems to me to make a kind of sense, is that Prince Charles, after escorting the body of his former wife back to England, will come north again to be with his sons, perhaps to bring them to London. But we don't know.
OK, David, thank you very much indeed. David Rose at Balmoral there. Well, Ron Allison, a former press secretary of the Queen, joins us in the studio now. Ronald Allison, we know that Prince Charles is due to arrive with Princess Diana's sister in Paris pretty soon now. What must be going through their minds?
It's always very difficult to speculate on what's going through somebody else's mind, but I think it's safe to assume that they'll all be thinking that this is the last journey in the world they ever would wish to have taken. Numbness, sort of the shock and the horror that they will have been feeling since first thing this morning, that perhaps is beginning to wear off, and now reality is bearing in on them. And I mean, as I say, it's always dangerous to put oneself in anybody else's place, but we can just imagine the feelings as they drive to the hospital, and the reality strikes home.
Now, in your time with the royal family, you had many dealings with the press. When Earl Spencer says that he knows that the press had a direct hand, as he put it, in his sister's death, is he right?
I need to ask him, I'm sorry if I'm sounding evasive, I don't quite know what he means by that.
Well, clearly he's in shock.
Yes, he's speaking very emotively, as one would expect. I think at times of sudden death and bereavement, there's always the feeling on the part of those that are left to strike out at somebody. Somebody is to be blamed, or somebody is responsible. So I can't really say exactly what he had in mind when he was using those words. It's a fact of life, of being a public figure these days, that the press are going to pay you intense attention. That we've been discussing throughout the day is the case. The princess and others like her will not manipulate the press, but will use the press to further the causes which they hold dear. We know, again, what those have been in the princess's case. They then find it difficult sometimes when they can't tell the press to go away. I'm now closing the door, as it were, and I'm now going into my private world. Maybe they should be allowed to do that, but that is just not the way of it. And when it's the constant pressure on the private life as well as on the public life, that's when it can seem almost unbearable. Going back to my own very much gentler days in the 70s when I was press secretary there, it was still very difficult at times to get the press to draw a distinction between the public and the private parts of people's lives. But I must say that I always drew a distinction, and I'm drawing it again now, between the staff photographers working for organizations in this country who have editors and proprietors, people who can be approached by Buckingham Palace Press Office, whoever else it may be, and asked to ease off, step back, what have you. We saw at Balmoral with the photo call that the Prince had with the two young sons 2 or 3 weeks ago. That took place, and then there was apparently no intrusion, and there was another photo call. It can be dealt with. But when you've got the freelancers, the paparazzi, going for the big money because they know the picture will sell, I really don't know how that can be controlled. And what's possible in the United Kingdom, if legislation is introduced, may not be possible in other parts of the world.
Ron, can we just talk a little bit about the Princess of Wales' legacy? In that famous interview, she talked of becoming the Queen of Hearts. Had she achieved that by the time of her death?
Quite. Again, I don't quite know what she was meaning by that in the fullest sense, but if she was meaning that she was going to devote herself to other people, to good causes, to alleviating suffering, to helping other people understand the suffering of HIV victims, sufferers of AIDS, the homeless, what have you, then she was certainly on her way to succeeding. And part of the tragedy which strikes me about the big tragedy of today is that it's come just at a time when, perhaps in her personal life, but certainly in the other side of her life, she did seem to me to be establishing a style. A year after the divorce, she isolated the charities to which she was going to devote considerable time. She was focusing in on them. She was achieving a very great deal. We'd all thought, if we'd thought about it at all, that landmines were bad things and it would be much better if there weren't any. But now, because of her efforts, the world, or much of the world, is talking about it. President Clinton, or Mrs. Clinton, Hillary Clinton, was saying it was meeting the princess and hearing her talk about this that made the president think again about landmines. So she had a tremendous impact, and she was well on her way to establishing herself as somebody who could make a difference and who had causes for which not only she cared, but which other people could be brought to care.
And of course with so much more potential. Ronald Allison, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's just keep you up to date with some of the information that's coming into the ITN newsroom. Mark Webster has been monitoring developments. Mark.
Well, we now know that with Prince Charles in Paris to collect the body of his former wife, preparations are also underway at RAF Northolt near London, where they will greet the body when it gets back to the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister, of course, Tony Blair, has made his way down from his constituency Sedgefield to be there at RAF Northolt when the BA 146 bearing Princess Diana's body does actually get back. People have found different ways to sympathise with this event. In Cheltenham, for instance, there was supposed to be a march of 1,000 people celebrating the return of trade union rights at GCHQ. Instead of having their normal band, they decided to do it silently with nothing but a drum playing throughout. Mrs. Blair with the children had also headed down to London. There's also been condemnation from former Labour Prime Minister James Callaghan about the way the photographers behaved in this incident. He says, and I quote him, "I think most people regard it as disgusting. I certainly do, but I doubt if we'll see any improvement at all in their behaviour." There's also been personal tributes pouring in to the Princess of Wales, one in particular from Elton John, who, of course, she comforted herself at Gianni Versace's funeral. Elton John called it a tragic and senseless death. He said, "The world has lost one of its most compassionate humanitarians, and I've lost a special friend." Terry Waite, too, the former Beirut hostage, has paid his own special tribute to the Princess of Wales, as have many, many other people at high and low throughout the day.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Well, Princess Diana's most recent high-profile calls, as we were just discussing, which twice landed her in a political row, was that of trying to persuade the world to ban anti-personnel landmines. She was determined to use her influence to bring attention to the suffering that they caused, and in turn help persuade governments to do something about it. Our Africa correspondent Steve Scott accompanied the Princess on her anti-mines trip to Angola. This is his report.
Dressed down and ready for work, a princess swapping glamour for a new hands-on approach to her charity work. In January, she chose war-ravaged Angola to launch this fresh image and put her face behind the Red Cross Landmines campaign. The victims she met had no idea who she was. They were just glad somebody was taking notice. They found her visit uplifting, and where others would have been embarrassed, the princess was completely at ease with the serious injuries confronting her. She was, though, quite clearly moved by many of the tragic stories she listened to. At the time, the princess described the trip as humbling, with the effect of hardening her stance against anti-personnel mines. Her visit made headlines worldwide, but also sparked criticism from some British MPs who blamed her for meddling in politics. Somewhat annoyed, the princess replied she was not a politician, but a humanitarian, always had been, always would be.
Firing.
The man who accompanied her in Angola said today her magic had an extraordinary effect.
When the Princess of Wales became involved, suddenly the interest escalated. Journalists who wrote articles about things nothing to do with landmines had to suddenly swat up on landmine issues and learn about the subject, get to know it, and report it. And we saw the reporting of landmines in some of the most obscure journals in the world.
Earlier this month, she took her campaign to Bosnia, taking time to talk to those, many of them children, whose lives have been shattered by the war there. As always, focusing on the youngsters to help publicise the devastation mines have caused and the threat they still pose. The princess knew she'd be followed wherever she went, so she decided to turn that to the advantage of tens of thousands across the world who are in no position to help themselves. Steve Scott, ITN.
Well, we go over now to Downing Street and our political correspondent, Tom Bradby. Tom, is Mr. Blair going to Downing Street or going straight to the airport?
We understand that Mr. Blair has not, in fact, yet left Sedgefield, and what he's going to do is go to Teesside Airport and fly down to Northolt from there, where he's going to meet the Prince of Wales and then possibly return to his family later on this evening at Chequers. Dermot, I heard you and Nick talking earlier there about arrangements for the funeral. We haven't heard anything official, of course, and may not for some time, but there is speculation that officials are working towards next weekend. They're looking at that kind of timescale. There's even a suggestion that it may actually go beyond that and not be this week at all, but in fact at the start of next week. Now, got nothing official to confirm that, but that certainly seems to be the kind of timescale that the palace is working on. Now, that poses certain practical difficulties for the government. There, of course, they say they're waiting to hear what Buckingham Palace have got to say, and it's really a matter for them and the family. But of course, there are practical implications politically for that kind of timescale, and the obvious one is the question of the Scottish referendum. Now, they've pretty much ruled out changing the date of the referendum, because that would mean recalling Parliament and putting through another bill with a different date, and they're briefing very heavily that they're not likely to do that. But in the meantime, they've got this difficult question of completely suspending campaigning in Scotland. They've already made it clear that they are going to suspend campaigning, but of course the referendum's not very far away, and there's an awful lot of activity going on. There are adverts on television, there are adverts on posters, so they've got to make that difficult judgment about exactly what to stop.
Tom, if MPs aren't sitting, how will Parliament express its condolences?
I think individually, we've already had today a number of MPs and a lot of very senior politicians expressing their shock and sorrow. It's very difficult to get a sense of what might potentially happen this week at the moment, because I think today, I mean, just talking to Downing Street officials, I was walking down the street with one of them earlier, and there's just a palpable sense of shock at what's happened, and it's very difficult to see beyond that. I mean, there's the whole question of privacy legislation, and we've talked about that. There's the question of the funeral arrangements. There's the question of the practical considerations of the referendum in Scotland. There is the question of whether Parliament might be recalled, but as I say, they've ruled that out. But at the moment, they've said a fair amount today, but their attitude now, if you like, is, well, we've said all we can. I mean, really, it's a question of getting over the shock at this stage, and then perhaps tomorrow looking beyond that. And I mean, the Prime Minister has in fact cancelled, or is in the process of cancelling, all his engagements tomorrow. He had a number of engagements, a meeting with the CBI and so on. That's clearly not going to be appropriate. There's clearly going to be a lot of work in making the arrangements for the funeral, so it looks as if he's going to cancel everything tomorrow at this stage.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. And just to let you know, we have picked up on the news wires here in the studio that Prince Charles has arrived at a French military airport just outside Paris, presumably now making his way to the hospital.
Villa Coublay, the name of that airport.
Thanks very much, Nick. Well, the Princess made an immeasurable contribution to good causes around the world, but she was also a world leader in another field. Widely regarded as one of the most beautiful women in the world, her elegance and style made her an icon of the fashion empires. Today, designers and fashion writers join together in their tributes to her. Ben McCarthy reports.
From the moment she appeared in the public...
Their entire careers to her.
Without doubt.
Without doubt. She was fantastic.
She was the ambassador, when she, as a royal princess, the ambassador for British fashion around the world. And because of that, and because she was dressed beautifully and looked wonderful, buyers from all around the world came to buy from British designers.
And designers knew the world was watching Diana. Her clothes were breathtaking, and sometimes almost daring. But as well as the acclaim, there was criticism. Some frowned on the
stylish nation, and she single-handedly rather changed that from, starting as a nursery school teacher, looking, you'd never notice what she wore, to being somebody that we cannot take our eyes off her.
In June, Diana parted with many of her dresses at a charity auction in New York. Most will now become museum pieces. It was an act in which her love of fashion combined to help those for whom she cared. Ben McCarthy, ITN.
Just to keep you updated on developments, we're now getting reports that Prince Charles, after landing at a military airport just outside Paris, was driven straight into the centre of Paris without any ceremony. Right, we're joined now by Hilary Alexander, the fashion editor of the Daily Telegraph. Hilary Alexander, we just heard the Emanuels there, who of course designed that famous wedding dress, saying that she was very much an ambassador for British fashion. Is that the way you saw it?
Absolutely. I think she was quite simply probably the most important style icon of the century. She eclipsed anybody else, no matter what she was wearing, whether she was wearing a simple white shirt and jeans to visit war victims, or whether she was in the most fantastic gown and jewellery for a premiere or a big charity dinner. She always looked completely beautiful.
Where did she get this amazing ability to look great in just about anything?
I think it was slightly intuitive. It was probably always there. But I think being in the public eye made her more aware that, it was very important to wear the right clothes for the job. And she seemed to have an instinctive sense to choose something that was eye-catching, that suited her, and was really either sort of very much in step with fashion, if not slightly ahead of it.
She also had this incredible ability, didn't she, to almost start a trend on her own?
Oh, she could. She wasn't afraid of being daring or being controversial in the choice of her clothes. I think we all remember, even on the trip to Australia, when she took us to a family heirloom, I think it was emeralds and diamonds, that should have been a choker, and wore it as the most sensational sort of headband around her forehead. It was little touches like that.
She didn't get overly sentimental about the dresses, though, did she? Because, of course, she sold quite a lot of them off for charity just a few months ago.
I think that was also part of the way she saw her new role in life. She didn't want to be seen simply as a clothes horse, and I think she felt that she'd worn the dresses, some of them, many, many times, and perhaps they'd slightly outlived their usefulness in her wardrobe, and they could now do good for others, by being auctioned for charity and then being exhibited in museums so that, many, many other people could see them.
And she certainly did know how to use fashion to her own advantage. One recalls during the Prince Charles programme on television, Princess Diana famously wearing an amazing black dress, which of course stole all the headlines the next day.
Yes, that was by another British designer, Christina Stambolian. And I mean, it was very, very daring. I think it was probably the most daring dress we'd ever seen her wear. Very short, off the shoulder, quite a bit of cleavage showing. But I think she used fashion to express sort of how she was feeling at the time. And I think she was trying to say, this is the way I am. I feel strong and confident no matter what happens.
And thank you very much indeed. Well, within the last few minutes, the Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashdown, has added his voice to the tributes paid to Diana, Princess of Wales. This is what he had to say.
At this moment, concentrate on one thing, and that is remembering that this is, although a national tragedy, preeminently a personal one, and our first thoughts must be for her close family, the Prince of Wales, and those who were related to her. Our first thoughts, our prayers and our condolences must be with them. The rest can wait until later on. It's difficult even to find a rational judgment about what her life meant. So I think this is a moment for reflection, for condolences, and above all to think of the family themselves.
Paddy Ashdown there, the Liberal Democrat leader, paying his own personal tribute to Diana, Princess of Wales. Well, let's go now to Nicholas Owen, our royal correspondent, with me all day in the studio. Nicholas, you're keeping a close eye on the latest developments. Something new up on the wires.
Well, it was what Tom Bradby was talking about in Downing Street, actually, but sort of fleshing out the details of that. Tomorrow the Prime Minister was going to be having meetings with the TUC and then with the CBI, but he's decided to cancel all of those, and everybody will understand why. There's some discussion now about this business of the funeral, which one moves on to these things. Well, it might seem distressingly quickly, but it's the reality of the situation. But the Downing Street is saying that they expect the Buckingham Palace will be the people to make the announcement about the funeral, and it could come tonight, but it's more likely to come tomorrow, but it could come tonight. Just picking up one thing that Hilary Alexander was talking about, the famous auction of gowns. I mean, one of the most touching things, they produced this amazingly marvellous brochure, if that's the right way of putting it, of the prospectus of the auction. £30 a time they cost alone, and all money going to charity, and you opened it, and there inside, signed by Diana herself, was a tribute to her son William, Wills as she always called him, saying the auction was all his idea, just emphasising how much notice she took of her son.
Very interesting point, that the relationship she had especially with Wills, treated him very much as an adult, a confidant almost.
A confidant, certainly. I mean, it was often suggested that in the dark days of her marriage, when she was crying and so on, that it was William, the sensitive one, who would go along, knock on Mum's door and go in and say, what's happening now and all that sort of thing. I mean, that won't be so unfamiliar, I guess, to parents who've been in the situation of divorce, but it was always William who cared so very much deeply. I'm not suggesting little Harry didn't, but of course he was so much younger at the time. I think we can go to Buckingham.
Let's take a look at the scene outside Buckingham Palace.
Oh, no, this is in Paris. We're in Paris.
Presumably is Prince Charles arriving at the hospital. Been whisked past there in a Jaguar, perhaps supplied by the British ambassador. There we have the front of the hospital.
Been masses of press obviously out there all day long. Inside that hospital,
there
it's where
the Union Jack.
Yes.
Right. Let's see them getting out.
Watching that. There's
President Chirac.
Yes, and of course the Prince of Wales. Those two have become very friendly in recent times anyway, and now meeting under such tragic circumstances. Being accompanied into meeting the hospital staff.
There's the British ambassador just looking round there.
And Diana's two sisters accompanying them as far as we're aware. Yes, I'm sure that's them there.
Guard of honour there. But no formality.
No formality at all. But this was the hospital where there was that desperate attempt to keep Diana alive. in the early hours of this morning. Something like 2 hours, it said, were spent trying to prevent Diana, Princess of Wales, from dying from those
and as we were
injuries.
discussing with experts in cardiac problems here, them saying that the French, very, very well equipped, reacted very, very fast, did their very, very best to save her.
Nothing could be done. Quite impossible to imagine anybody surviving that accident, I'm afraid. So there is the Prince of Wales, now in the hospital where his former wife died in the early hours of this morning following that road accident.
Okay, Nick, thanks very much indeed. Well, the Harrods boss, Mohammed Al Fayed, said the death of his eldest son and the princess had been an appalling and quite needless tragedy. He pointed the finger of blame for their death directly at the press photographers who'd been pursuing them. He said Dodi had been a kind, gentle and decent person who'd had a tremendous regard for Princess Diana. Kevin Dunn reports.
Heir to the Harrods empire, Dodi Fayed had a reputation as a millionaire playboy who had dated a string of glamorous women. But in recent years, he had played an increasingly important part in the running of the Harrods business and was seen by his father as his natural successor. When his friendship with Diana was made public last month, after the princess's holiday aboard Mohammed Al Fayed's yacht, the media interest in the couple became intense. One of Dodi's former girlfriends, model Kelly Fisher, even surfaced to threaten to sue him for breaking off their alleged engagement. But his friends say his relationship with Diana was deepening.
I knew how sincere he was, and I think that they were enjoying their life together, they're enjoying each other's company, they were getting to know each other, and why not?
Dodi's father, Mohammed Al Fayed, and his brother Ali had come from humble beginnings in Egypt to take charge of Britain's most famous store. His position brought him into contact with royalty, and he apparently encouraged his son's friendship with Diana, though Dodi found press attention intrusive.
He wasn't an angry man. He was still in the throes of developing this relationship with Diana, and that was the main focus. But the press was making it very difficult.
Today, the flag was flying at half-mast over the Harrods store in Knightsbridge as the Al Fayed family tried to come to terms with their loss. Kevin Dunn, ITN.
Well, let's move just down the road from Harrods to Kensington Palace, Princess Diana's London home. Helen Wright is there. Helen, presumably grief to the foremost there.
Absolutely. I don't think I've ever seen so many flowers as we can see here today. They literally line the pavement, piled 10 deep in some parts, and then the line of flowers snakes round the wall, right round the walls of Kensington Palace Gardens. And I don't think I've seen as many people before. I think everyone's been surprised by just how many people have turned up here today. They're lining the road behind me. Everybody's still bringing flowers. The police desperately trying to sort of keep the crowd moving. They're literally blocked off the road here at one point, and everybody just seems to want to be here with other people, to mourn with them, and just to talk to other people about their thoughts and memories about the princess.
Sorrow, as you describe it, clearly the dominant emotion there, but is there any evidence of this suppressed anger we've been talking about?
There is certainly anger towards the media here. We've seen examples of that here today. There was a man in the crowd earlier on who was shouting at the press photographers, "I hope you're satisfied. I hope you're happy now. You shouldn't be here today. You shouldn't be here." And the crowd, some members of the crowd applauded those sentiments. But there are other people who really feel that the press should be here. They should be showing just how strongly people feel about Diana and should be showing the tributes that are being paid to her today.
Helen Wright at Kensington Palace. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Mark Webster now in the ITN newsroom with the latest developments.
Yes, well, as we were saying earlier, the effects of Diana's untimely death have been felt throughout Europe, throughout the world. One of the very latest things I'm just reading from the screen here is the pop star Michael Jackson has cancelled a concert in Belgium today because of his shock at the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. Jackson said he would have a difficult time performing and didn't want to do the concert because of her sudden death. In addition to that, the comedian Michael Barrymore, who's one of the last people who had a proper heart-to-heart with Diana, did say after 2.5 hours at Kensington Palace recently, he said I knew her for a year or two, but even in that time came to realize she was unique. She is irreplaceable. That is among the hundreds of tributes which have been paid, everybody from Nelson Mandela right through to crowned heads, heads of government, heads of state, have been paying their tributes to Diana today for her work for charity and for her extraordinary personality. The latest, of course, we know that it is in Paris. Prince Charles is now there. He's at the hospital. He'll be coming back to the base, an RAF base near London, accompanying his former wife's body. And I say he will be met there by the Prime Minister, and her body will then be taken to a private mortuary in London. And arrangements are now underway, of course, as to exactly what is to be done for her funeral, on what sort of scale it will be. The government has made it perfectly plain that it'll be entirely up to Buckingham Palace to decide exactly how to treat the funeral.
Mark Webster, thank you very much indeed. Well, Nick, we heard Mark Webster there, and we've seen Prince Charles arriving at the Petit-Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris. Just fill us in on the timing of his progress from here.
Well, it is said that he's going to be having a meeting inside with the hospital staff, obviously thanking them for the work they did, the desperate struggle, as we were saying earlier, to try to keep the princess alive earlier on. And then the idea is that he should return accompanying the body of Diana together with her two sisters, and the plane, the British Aerospace 146 of the Queen's flight, will take off from military airbase Villacoublay on the outskirts of Paris in a short hop over to Northolt, where they will be met by Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, at about 7 o'clock this evening.
Nick, let's just have a quick look at some of the scenes down there at Buckingham Palace. People almost wandering around aimlessly, almost lost for words.
Indeed, in what looks like a very sunny, bright day. And the weather is extremely inappropriate, isn't it? Because it's absolutely the most dreadful day that has ever been seen, I think, in the gates of the front of the gates of that palace. As we've said, the Queen is not there. She and the rest of the royal family, apart from the Prince of Wales, are up at Balmoral. It's not yet known when they will be on their way back to London, and of course when William, Diana's 15-year-old son, and Harry, her 12-year-old son, when they will be coming back. But it's generally assumed that it won't be any time today. There's obviously no great rush for them to come back, and they've already had the most terrible news to digest. They had to go along to the church this morning, Crathy Church beside Balmoral, the whole royal family there, including the Queen Mother, Queen, Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Charles, and the two young princes. They in public there were the boys doing obviously what was seen as duty. But as I say, we don't know when they will be back to London, and we are next to await the details of the funeral and all the other things that are going to go with it. And we keep on talking about this, but it is going to be a massive national event. I mean, my memory goes back. We all do this, don't we? Depending on our age, my memory goes back to Churchill's funeral, 1965. Yes. One remembers that, the old black and white television pictures so well, lying in state in that case. The feeling throughout the nation was perhaps a bit the same. Well, it was the same, of course. I mean, Winston Churchill had seen this country through the war and so on, but that is the sort of scale of mourning we're undoubtedly going to see. I think everybody is going to want to have some part of it. They're going to want to show how they feel. Those pictures from Kensington Palace, didn't they show that? People wanted to be there, as Helen Wright said. People want to be at Buckingham Palace at a time like this. They sort of want to go somewhere to show how they feel, to show that it's an overused phrase, the nation united in grief. But I'm absolutely certain that is true at the moment.
As our reporter down at Buckingham Palace, Harry Smith, pointed out, there was slight irony that people seem to be focusing on Buckingham Palace, given the relations that the Princess had with the Buckingham Palace hierarchy, especially in later years.
Indeed, but still, that whatever you say about that, all the ups and downs of Diana's relationship with the royal family, and of course her marriage and subsequent divorce from the Prince of Wales, it is still, when it's all said, the centre of national life.
Nick, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's cross straight now to Paris. Our reporter there, Robert Hall, has the latest. The Prince of Wales having just arrived at the hospital there. Robert, what's going on?
Well, Dermot, there was very, very little ceremony. It's very great contrast to a normal royal visit here. Prince Charles stepped off the plane straight into a convoy. The press were kept well back at the airport. He was then driven at high speed straight into Paris and straight into the hospital behind me. He was greeted formally by the French president. There was a certain amount of conversation outside. He met hospital staff. They've now gone inside for a series of private meetings and discussions. the French President will wish to express his condolences, I'm sure. Prince Charles, I know, wants to talk to members of the hospital staff who worked so hard to try and save the life of his former wife in the early hours of this morning. They should be out very shortly. There will be a certain amount of ceremonial on his departure. There will be a small honour guard of the Presidential Guard, and then the cavalcade, the convoy rather, one vehicle longer, a hearse of course, will then proceed back to the military airfield just outside Paris. The plane is expected to take off. It's running a little bit late. It was due to take off at around 7 o'clock our time, that's 6 o'clock your time, en route for the RAF Northolt airfield just outside London.
OK, Robert, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, the royal biographer Hugo Vickers is with me in the studio now. Hugo Vickers, you saw those pictures of Prince Charles arriving at the hospital. The word dignified comes to mind in the way he carried himself.
Yes, absolutely. As always one might say, but also very much noted the little guard of honour, which Robert Hall mentioned, and the President standing there. I trust we'll do the same for her when she comes back to England.
Now, the big question now, what effect is this going to have on the heart of the royal family?
Well, it changes the whole emphasis. What you must remember, of course, is the Princess of Wales was slightly outside the royal family and had been for the last year, just re-establishing, as we've said very often in the course of today, a different role for herself, which was independent of the royal family. But nevertheless, when something like this happens, we remember that she is, after all, the mother of the future king and of his younger brother, and it is that position which is what will be respected at the time of her funeral.
But we've talked about her treatment at the hands of the royal hierarchy, the royal insiders. It's hard to know which way public opinion will go at this point in time, but is it likely that any of the sorrow and the anger and the grief will be directed in those areas, and that it actually could damage ultimately?
Well, I certainly hope not, because I think that what people must understand is that even if a divorce has happened, this doesn't wipe out the good earlier years, it doesn't wipe out the shared family. She is still a mother. As you know, the relations between the Prince and Princess of Wales were always at their strongest when they were parents, whatever their personal differences might have been. I have always felt, in fact, that the marriage might have survived publicly, if not privately, had it not been for the intervention of the press, the stolen tapes and letters and revelations of royal servants, and the continual pressure. Because in this country we have about 12 newspapers coming out each day, all competing against each other and not actually working in the slightest bit in the national interest.
And what now, do you think, in terms of the relationship between the royals and the press? Will the press start to lay off, be almost embarrassed after this, or will the royals put the shutters up?
Well, they won't have Princess Diana anymore, and of course she was this huge focal attraction to them. I'm hoping that, obviously, that they will respect the fact that this family is going through a period of grief. The Prince of Wales now has the role of being the sole parent to those two boys. Sure that everything in his character, his natural sympathy, his introspective streak, and his understanding of young people and things will actually mean that he will fulfill that role, I think, very well. It's not going to be easy for him. It's not going to be easy for his boys. His boys are at a very sensitive and difficult age, just teenagers. That's the worst time. And a very loving and very much a mother who was very much there for them. And I think that's going to be terribly difficult. So they must have a bit of time. And the royal family will, I'm sure, unite to support Prince Charles. And I just hope that, that they could be given a little bit of peace, really.
Hugo Vickers, thank you very much. Well, Diana's death didn't just rob the nation of a princess. As we've just been saying, it robbed her two young sons of a mother. Princes William and Harry were told of her death this morning by their father, Prince Charles, at Balmoral. Princess Diana had never made any secret of the fact that her relationship with them was the most important thing in her life. It was, she said recently, what kept her in Britain. Harry Smith reports.
The two princes, seen here at Balmoral 2 weeks ago, are said to be very different characters who will handle their grief in very different ways. The elder of the two, William, is often described as reserved and sensitive. In public, he usually shows a dislike for the sort of media attention his mother had to learn to cope with. At school at Eton, where he's been studying for his GCSEs, he's said to have blended in well and enjoys being treated as just another one of the boys. His school and the friendships he's formed there could be a source of strong support as he tries to come to terms with his loss. His younger brother Harry is more outgoing, a characteristic his mother is said to have greatly admired. he's a keen sportsman and displays a remarkable degree of self-confidence in public, rarely troubled by the presence of the cameras and often eager to play up to them. Diana, always the picture of the devoted mother, said recently she would have left Britain if it hadn't been for her sons. Now they, who were always going to have difficult childhoods, must face some of the most difficult years of growing up without their mother. Harry Smith, ITN.
Well, I'm joined now by Victor Adeboale, the chief executive of the homeless charity Centrepoint, which Diana, of course, took a very special interest in. Victor Adeboale, how did the Princess help your charity?
Well, in a number of ways. Obviously, the fact that she lent her kudos and high profile to our cause was something that helped us maintain the issue in the public eye. But we were always very conscious that it wasn't about the Princess or about the patron. It was about the cause and about the fact that there are thousands of young people who are homeless or at risk of being so. And she was very conscious of that. The other way she helped is by just being human and talking to young people and getting rid of some of this stuff that she was surrounded by, and just being friendly and being well with them. And she didn't have to do that.
So she never bottled up her emotions, it all came flooding.
Yeah, I mean, you know, some of the young people that Centrepoint sees have had very difficult times, very difficult circumstances, have been lied to for a long time, and they make excellent lie detectors. And the Princess was able to she was genuine, because if she wasn't genuine, they would have pulled it straight away. And my experience of her was that she enjoyed her visits. She didn't have to laugh with our young people, she didn't have to relate to them, but she did because she wanted to.
And they were far from flying visits. She spent an awful lot of time there. She
spent time with us, she spent time with young people, and we appreciate that.
She did, of course, come from very different backgrounds from many of the young people involved in your charity. How did she empathise with them?
Well, empathy is universal. I don't think it necessarily requires money or the lack of it. I couldn't tell you where it came from. I think it would be presumptuous of me to attempt to do so, but I think that she had a genuine feeling for their circumstance, and could imagine, I suppose, where they were coming from and who they are, and some of the complications and confusions around their life, which may have matched some of her own.
Do you have any abiding and striking memories of the Princess? How will you remember her?
Well, I'll remember personally, I suppose. I remember her as someone who was a consummate professional. I mean, she was good at what she did, but she was also very human. And I remember being surprised and impressed by my first occasion when she met a group of young people at an annual meeting. She walked straight up to one of them and said to him, "Hello, Joe," and it was either I never figured out whether she was just very well briefed, had the memory of an elephant, but either way she knew that young person, remembered that she'd met that young person before amongst the thousands of people she must meet in any one period, and made a direct connection with that person. And it's something that I won't forget, and neither will that young person.
Now, we've talked an awful lot about the Princess's bad relationship with the press. It was, of course, in her charity work, though, where she was able to harness her power to get the focus of attention on charities like yours.
Well, we at Centrepoint have always relied on the support of the public, and in the support of Diana, Princess of Wales, we were always very careful to keep the focus on the issue, and she respected that. She would, I'm sure, would want us to continue with the support of the public, and she never got in the way of that. And despite some of the more, I have to say, more cynical press statements about her involvement with Centrepoint, we never experienced her as someone who got in the way of the message. And I think she'd want us to continue doing what she helped us do, which is ensure that no young person's at risk because they don't have a safe place to stay.
And how have your staff, the kids, how have they taken this terrible, terrible news?
Well, we're all a bit shocked. We all took it very, very hard, and it still has a bit of a dreamlike quality to it. We obviously have been trying to get around all the projects, and certainly me and my colleagues have rung around all our projects, and we would want to reassure Centrepoint staff and Centrepoint young people that we are here for them, and we'll be there for them tomorrow and the day after that and the day after.
Well, I was talking earlier with some people from the Lighthouse Project, where of course she did an enormous amount of work there as well, and they said that this had made them want to redouble their efforts as a lasting tribute to the Princess.
Yes, I think Centrepoint, our relationship with the Princess was always on the basis that we don't give up. This is Centrepoint, and we don't give up. She was very committed to our young people and to the lives that we help to improve. On Monday, it's business as usual. I think we'd be lying if we said that we weren't hurt by what's happened. We are hurt by what's happened. We're missing her now. But our tribute to the Princess will be to redouble our efforts, but we will do that with the support of the public, and I'm convinced that that support will be increased as a result of the work that she's done.
Victor, just stay with us there. Nicholas Owen, our royal correspondent.
Victor, I wanted to bring up something I don't think you mentioned, but isn't it true that the Princess did bring her sons to see your charity work? I mean, that determined to bring the sort of future heir to the throne face to face with the grimmer realities of life and the way that you see it.
The fact of the matter is that many of our young people are the same age as of the princes. Both William and Harry met young people who were very similar ages, though obviously very different backgrounds. The future kings of England are going to be the future kings of every one of us, including Centrepoint's young people. The visit was a memorable occasion. It wasn't meant to be a public visit, but it turned out to be one, as many of these things do. It worked well, it went smoothly. There was a communication across the rivers, I suppose, and it's something that I will respect her for.
What was it like on that day? What was the reaction of the young princes to what they were seeing? How did their mother behave with them as well?
With dignity. It was something that we. My recollection of the day was that it went very smoothly. The princes and the princess weren't fazed by what they saw and what they heard, as I would expect. We talked about the issues of homelessness and the realities of life on the streets for many of our young people and the dangers that many of our young people face. I can't say what the impact of the visit was on the princes, and I wouldn't presume to do so. At this time, our thoughts are with them. They're two young people that are going to be devastated by what's happened.
We've talked of the similarities between Diana and her eldest son, William, the future king. Did you notice that similarity of temperament?
No. I mean, I'm the chief executive of Centrepoint. I don't know and didn't know the Princess of Wales as well as I would have liked to, or her sons. What I did pick up on that day was a woman and two sons, close, interested in the issues, wanting to learn more, making an effort to contact people at a human level, and achieving that in some instances. I think that myself and other Centrepoint members of staff were privileged to see such an occasion, and I think many of the young people that met her and her sons on that day will remember it for a long time.
Happy memories, Victor Adebowale. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the Princess's death comes at a time when she appeared to be making significant strides in both her public and private lives. In recent months, she'd enjoyed tremendous success in her campaign to get a worldwide ban on anti-personnel landmines, winning backing from countries across the world, including the government here. And her private life seemed to be entering a new phase, thanks to her blossoming friendship with Dodi Fayed. Ian Glover-James reports.
In the last months of her life, it seemed the princess was forever on the move. A restless lifestyle, never out of the public eye. Unburdened, it seemed, by heavy security. This was the image the princess chose to portray. The caring campaigner for humanitarian causes. Here, against landmines in Angola. She'd cut down on the causes she worked for, but the cruel injuries inflicted by mines, long after conflicts like Bosnia had ended, affected her deeply. Her fame generated huge publicity for what were once little-known issues. Simply by being photographed with the disabled victims of landmines ensured those working to remove them won unprecedented support, even in the White House. By now, her fame as an ambassador for good causes was truly international, and she was seen with some of the world's most celebrated figures. She seemed at ease in a role she developed for herself and was greeted enthusiastically wherever she went. She was named Humanitarian of the Year in America and mixed with that nation's most powerful and influential figures. Here,
Passion for their child.
it wasn't always so high-powered. She twice flew to Pakistan to support Imran Khan's cancer hospital. And it was here that a photograph of a caring Diana cradling a sick child was to spark her last and controversial press interview. That photograph inspired the French daily Le Monde. Her interview started a political controversy on landmines, and this being just after she celebrated her 36th birthday party in London, she said press intrusion in her private life was so bad...
Well, cutting out of that report to go to Paris now live, and there is the scene. That, I believe, there is the car containing the Prince of Wales. I think in front of him is the van containing it's the hearse, isn't it, containing the remains of the Princess of Wales.
I'm afraid to say that almost certainly was. I can't imagine it would be any other vehicle. Just glimpsed as they left the Petit-Saint-Pierre hospital there.
So Charles has been there, what, about half an hour in all. We saw him arriving there. He went inside, met some of the hospital staff who tried so valiantly to save the princess's life. To no effect. There are the crowds who've been gathering there since the early morning. Shocked Parisian crowds.
Apparently the same thing as in London, masses and masses of flowers laid, hundreds of people out on the street disbelieving. As exactly the same as in this country, and indeed from what we gather from all across the world, the same feeling of grief, of shock, disbelief, all those words. As we say, these are the scenes outside the hospital in Paris where the princess was taken in the early hours of this morning.
Now the prince came down from Aberdeen, landed at a small airport, a military airport just outside Paris. He's heading back there now. Where does he go after that?
He goes to RAF Northolt with the body of Diana and with the two sisters of Diana. And they arrive at Northolt, which is just northwest of London. RAF Northolt, which is the airport mostly used by aircraft of the Queen's flight, has special facilities for dealing with royal planes. And there they will be met by the Prime Minister. Not quite clear what happens after that, except we do know that the body of the princess will go to what has been described, I think, as a private mortuary, and nobody's quite certain where that is. And then we await further developments and announcements after that.
OK, Nick, thanks very much indeed. Let's cross now to Buckingham Palace. Our reporter, Harry Smith, is keeping an eye on things there. Harry, are the crowds there keeping up to date with events?
Well, I don't know if you can see them behind me, Dermot, but there's been a large crowd here all day since before dawn. The crowd, as you can see, is just as thick as it was earlier. There's an area you probably can't make out, but just in front of the main gates there. The police have created a special area where anyone who wants to can bring flowers and lay them. And throughout the day there have been hundreds of people bringing sometimes just a single rose that they've bought from a flower stall, other people arriving with large bouquets. All of them, the police have allowed them through, the large crowd. They've created a special corridor with barriers to keep most of the crowd back. Those who want to can come through there. They've paused for a moment, lay their flowers, we've had a few tears, and then they can file away.
Harry, I was there how people in the crowd were helping each other, were supporting each other, were talking to each other. Similar things going on there?
A great deal of talking to each other, yes, because one of the reasons people are coming here is because it's a focal point for the royal family.
Harry, sorry to interrupt you there. We're crossing over to Paris. There we have the very, very sad scene of the coffin containing the remains of the Princess of Wales being removed from the Petit-Saint-Pierre hospital. That is a few moments ago. We have, of course, seen Prince Charles and the hearse leaving. Accompanied by some bouquets. It's President Chirac and Prince Charles.
sisters of the princess behind there, looking obviously very distraught. The prince,
British ambassador just there behind the prince.
Man who had to announce the death of the princess to the world earlier this morning.
Harrowing time for them all. Just to the right there, those are the two sisters of Princess Diana.
Yes. So
this is the scene a few moments ago. As Prince Charles started that journey back to London.
Bring me back here afterwards and then take me home.
Very clear picture coming up of Prince Charles.
In the British Embassy Jaguar, based in Paris, of course. There he is on what his thoughts are now.
Possible to imagine.
Moment.
Very poignant image.
A little bit of a hold-up, as so often in these situations, reasons we can't see. The camera obviously staying
the camera's snapping around there.
Apparently there were 3 motorcycles with cameramen on the back of them, I was noticing, and even following the convoy from the airport. Whether they might have been semi-official rather than the paparazzi who apparently caused this terrible, terrible disaster.
In the background there, just caught a glimpse there of the white-coated medical team. Prince Charles obviously had a few words with them.
And so away to the airport.
Military airport
yes.
in Northolt. Now this is live picture we are receiving, I believe, just a few moments ago, after they left the hospital. This is making their journey through central Paris. There is the hearse containing the remains of the Princess of Wales. You can see the flag in the back.
As we said, the royal standard. She wasn't officially...
Prince Charles following close behind.
She wasn't officially a member of the royal family, of course, but was regarded as to be so, as the Queen herself said, and in death certainly regarded so, with that flag draped on that coffin.
Thanks, Nick. Well, now, let's tell you about what's been going on across the country. Thousands of worshippers have been praying for Princess Diana and the royal family in churches up and down the country. And our reporter Eric McInnes went to one service at a church in Warwickshire.
At this church in Warwickshire, as in so many across the land, people have come together to share their pain. For centuries, these buildings have been the magnet in times of triumph and tragedy. Today, that was no less so. Hundreds came to a rearranged service to express their grief.
We find ourselves saying, why? Why, God? Why should something like this happen, especially to someone who has already suffered a great deal of distress in life? And there are no easy answers to that question, and we shouldn't attempt to give any. Obviously, our hearts must go out to William and Harry, these 2 lads who've lost their mum so suddenly and so tragically, and also to Al Fayed too, and the family of the driver who lost his life.
In the coming days, people will have time to reflect on Princess Diana's life. She was deeply loved. Today, in these first hours, in villages and towns, shock and grief dominate the nation's thoughts. Eric McInnes, ITN, Warwickshire.
The scene there repeated, no doubt, in churches up and down the country. Let's cross now to our newsroom, where Mark Webster has been monitoring the very latest developments. Mark.
Well, as you saw there, the body of Diana, Princess of Wales, is now draped in the Royal Standard, is on its way to the airport near Paris, where it will be flown down back to the United Kingdom. Further evidence is of the respect that will be shown in the run-up to her funeral. The royal palaces are to remain closed tomorrow because of her death. Buckingham Palace staterooms, Windsor Castle, the Palace of Holyrood House and Sandringham would all be closed today, and on the day of the funeral Many more tributes pouring in, and I think I can remind you at this stage perhaps of some of the more touching ones that came in earlier today. Tony Blair, clearly very moved by her death, said, "I remember her personally with great affection. I think the whole country will remember her with the deepest affection and love. That's why our grief is so deep today." William Hague, the Conservative leader, says she was a shining individual who will never be forgotten, and I think that is how we should remember her. President Clinton said, "We liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS, for the cause of ending the scourge of landmines in the world, and for her love for her children, William and Harry." And Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, "She helped me to help the poor, and that's the most beautiful thing. She was a very great friend, in love with the poor." I think perhaps one of the more moving ones, or most moving ones, was from one of her friends, Rosa Monckton, who said, "As a friend, she was steadfast and loyal, and whenever I had any setback in my life, she was immediately there and would drop everything. She did everything from the heart. Her heart ruled her head, which is why I think she was so often misunderstood." One of the many, many tributes paid to her today.
Mark, thank you. Well, Princess Diana's death sparked an outpouring of grief from ordinary people throughout Britain and indeed throughout the world. Her work to help the plight of the homeless and people with illnesses like AIDS won her a unique position in the hearts of all those she met. Adrian Britton reports.
For someone who had always been a princess of the people, it should have surprised no one that she saw herself as the Queen of Hearts. Speak to the homeless, whom she constantly met and helped, and they will tell you of a princess who was not simply a figurehead for charities, but of a person who genuinely cared. Visit the hospitals where she met the sick and young, and they will describe a royal who was at ease, communicating at all levels.
She didn't hold back at all. If there was someone who was particularly sick, who was keeping in the background, she would know that she would somehow sense that they were there, and she would make her way to them, and she would talk to them and to their parents. And she gave enormous warmth, and she gave these people something that would stay with them all their lives.
People like Jason, who's been homeless in a hostel for 2 years. He met the princess twice.
A friendly person who was really nice to other people and towards other people. She was so easy to get on with and that. She was like God's gift.
While many of her visits to the homeless were in front of the cameras, frequently she insisted on no media coverage, such as at the Centrepoint charity, where many of her visits were in private. Here, they are mourning the loss of a patron who showed a special warmth.
She was able to remember individuals that she'd met on past occasions, and she was able to have a laugh and a joke in the full glare of a public visit, and in quiet private moments with young people. And I think that's something which she didn't have to do, and young people remember her for doing it.
That degree of care shown so clearly with AIDS patients, particularly during the near hysteria at the outbreak of the disease. She shook the hands of patients. She said they should be hugged. In every sense, she was a people's princess. Adrian Britton, ITN.
Let's go back now to Buckingham Palace and our reporter, Harry Smith. Harry, we interrupted you a few minutes ago to go over to Paris to see the sad scenes there. We were talking about the way the crowd at Buckingham Palace have been supporting each other, talking to each other, giving each other comfort.
Well, I think this is true to an extent, because a great many people have come here looking for information. This, as you might expect on such a pleasant Sunday afternoon, is always a place where tourists come. It's the focal point for the royal family as far as tourists are concerned. So there have been people wandering around who've simply come to see Buckingham Palace and weren't, when they arrived, terribly sure what had happened. They've been looking for news. Policemen and policewomen have been giving them that news. But there are people, a lot of them, who've been making a deliberate pilgrimage here today to lay flowers, to pay their tributes to the Princess of Wales. We've seen a lot of tears, we've seen a lot of sadness. I have to say there's also a sense of anger among some people that's been directed towards press photographers and on some occasions towards camera crews, because in some sense people do see that the press, if not to blame, then may have had a part to play in the death of the Princess of Wales.
Harry Smith, thank you very much indeed. Well, our royal correspondent Nicholas Owen has been with me all day. Nick, there's been an important development into finding out what exactly happened last night.
Well, it may be a pointer towards that. We've tended to forget that there was another person involved in all this who didn't die, and that was a British bodyguard. He's now been identified very clearly. And first of all, let me tell you that a doctor who treated him said the injuries suffered by Princess Diana's bodyguard in the crash, which killed her, are not life-threatening. Now, that doctor identifies the bodyguard as somebody called Trevor Rees-Jones. This is a doctor quoted here, Dr. Pierre Cotia. He says that Rhys-Jones suffered moderate head and lung injuries, but these were not life-threatening. Now, this was the accident, remember, which killed, of course, the Princess, Dodi Fayed, and the chauffeur who worked for the Ritz. So it was a terrible accident, but one man survived. That man's evidence and testimony is clearly going to be of vital importance when it comes to discovering exactly what did happen in that tunnel in the early hours of this morning.
Have we any idea if he was from the Royal Protection Squad or if he had been supplied by the Al Fayed family?
I don't know. I wish I did. I don't know. I find it hard to believe that he would be a British detective. I don't recognise his name, and I do know quite a lot of the royal policemen, but I don't recognise his name. I would think more likely he's one of the bodyguards which Mohammed Al Fayed and Dodi Fayed have around them. They've had obviously very many worries over the years about kidnapping and all the other things. They take security incredibly seriously, and that security has been extended to embrace the Princess of Wales. I would imagine that if he was a British policeman, we would have heard from the authorities long before now. It's remarkable that his fate, as we say, he has survived and his injuries are not life-threatening, that his fate is very barely reported today. But now we do know, we have a name, and we have a very, very important witness to those dreadful events.
Yes, indeed. Clearly what he has to say could provide vital clues as to the events of last night. I'm joined now by the constitutional historian, Dr. David Starkey. He's with us in the studio now. Dr. Starkey, the royal family have lost a glittering star. Can they possibly recover from this?
Diana indeed was a glittering star. The trouble was, like many glittering stars, she was a bit too big for the firmament. We talk about Diana as royal. Diana wasn't royal. She was a superstar. She's now up there with Elvis Presley, with James Dean, who also died in a car crash, with Princess Grace, who died in a car crash. In a sense, her fate now hangs over the royal family. She'll be a permanent ghost. She, in a sense, is a not entirely benign ghost. I think it will make it much more difficult to carry out the necessary reinvention of the monarchy, because not only, I think, are those crowds outside Buckingham Palace looking for a scapegoat from the press, they're also pointing a finger at the royal family in general, and Prince Charles in particular. It was very difficult to defend Prince Charles in front of those cameras with that crowd today.
Just to interject there, you do make the Princess of Wales almost sound like she'd reinvented herself as a show business personality. A lot of people see her as much more than that.
But the showbiz was an essential part of it. But equally, you know, there's a pilgrimage to Elvis's shrine. Diana, of course, was able to reinforce the glamour, the glitz, and the last few months have shown just how much glamour and glitz, everything that Harris could throw. But there was,
to be fair, there was so much more than glamour and glitz.
If you'll wait for a moment, she, this morning, was actually described by a hard-bitten royal correspondent as having become a saint. There's more than glamour and glitz, of course there is. But now the myth begins to roll. There's early death when you're young. You become eternal. You become, I'm going to use another word, I think she's become a martyr. And she'll be seen as somehow having been martyred, partly by the press, partly, dare one say it, by a royal family that never understood her, and which she never understood.
She did have this ability, though, didn't she, to slip between these worlds, to slip from the show business world to going amongst the victims of landmine accidents in Angola, almost without a blink of the eye. She could adapt to any situation.
She could, but equally she challenged. She was puzzling. She was difficult. She was ambiguous. Again, I think we're perhaps obviously moved by her death, tending to see only the good, as you're always supposed to do with the death, and eliminate the bad. Diana was dangerous. She was a loose cannon. People were frightened of her. She, more than
defined by some elements within royal circles.
As defined by many people, many elements within the Conservative Party. Diana, individually, is actually responsible for the shattering of the image of the family monarchy. She deliberately chose to go public with Andrew Morton's book. And again, her relationship with the press was so ambiguous. Obviously, this is the woman, half of the time, who literally fled, died fleeing from the press. The other half of the time, she embraced it, she loved it, she called paparazzi by their first names, you know.
Well, clearly she did have this ambiguous relationship with the press, as we've been discussing throughout the day. But she did, of course, harness it for some good.
She harnessed it for some good. She also harnessed it for a gigantic process of self-projection. She also harnessed it deliberately to do down her husband. The interview with Martin Bashir was one of the most sustained exercises of vilification that I've ever seen. It was brilliantly, professionally, ruthlessly handled.
Dr. Starkey, thank you very much. Well, let's go live to Paris now, and our reporter there is Robert Hall. Robert, Prince Charles just left a few moments ago. What's the mood there now?
Well, Dermot, the crowds are beginning to drift away. There have been several hundred people here throughout the day awaiting the arrival of Prince Charles and the departure of that coffin in the hearse, that very sad little convoy on its way back to the military airfield. They're drifting away. The drama for Paris, of course, isn't over. There's still the question mark over whether or not there'll be any prosecutions, and we're expecting, or we're hoping anyway, that the police may issue some sort of statement on that later tonight. They're still, remember, holding, we believe, 4 photographers who were or may not have been involved in the incident last night. We will wait to see whether any charges are to be preferred. I have got 1 or 2 more details about what actually happened when Prince Charles was here. We're told that both he and President Chirac viewed the princess's body privately. The coffin was then sealed and moved downstairs, while again the President and the Prince went to speak to hospital staff. It's been stressed that the Prince had expressed a very keen desire to talk to them, to thank them, to hear their account of those harrowing hours this morning before he left to return to Britain.
Robert, we've been getting the intriguing news here of the survival of one of the passengers in that car, a bodyguard, almost certainly an Al Fayed supplied bodyguard. Is there any news there on his condition, or indeed where he is?
Not as yet, no, but we are hearing, as I gather that you are, that the bodyguard may indeed have been British. We thought that he was another locally hired member of staff, one of the Ritz staff. It appears the bodyguard was British. That doesn't necessarily mean that he wasn't part of the Ritz staff, although Mr. Al Fayed does have a significant staff of his own. I should add, incidentally, while we've been talking about this very sad day, the departure of the princess's body, that of course there have been other victims in this crash, notably that of Dodi Al Fayed. Now, we believe that his father hopes to take him back to the UK, his body back to the UK tonight, another very sad journey.
Robert Hall in Paris, thank you very much. Well, just to give you some sense of the global scale of this story, Princess Diana's death is dominating the news in Russia too. She became well known there during visits to promote her charity work, especially amongst the country's children. British expatriates there have also been expressing their shock and sadness. From Moscow, Howell Jones reports.
Fresh flowers for the princess at the British Embassy in Moscow, more arriving every hour as the news spreads.
Леди Диана, принцесса Уэльская, бывшая...
Reports of the princess's death are dominating TV and radio here. At a church service, Russians and British expatriates alike prayed for her.
The world has lost somebody whose charitable work is almost irreplaceable.
It's just like when Kennedy died, you know, all over the world, people felt it, it's heartfelt pain, the same with Princess Diana,
2 years ago, the princess visited Moscow alone, her priority as ever to highlight charity work. At the Tushinsky Hospital near Moscow, she met some of Russia's least fortunate children. She was able to overcome the language barrier with simple grace, as she had done on trips around the world. And in Russia, as in every country she visited, photographers followed her, step by step, engagement by engagement. This was the image they were waiting for, the princess at the Bolshoi Ballet, the most famous woman in the world in one of Russia's most romantic settings. That trip allowed ordinary Russians to see the woman already so familiar to them from countless magazines, newspapers and TV shows. It left them in no doubt that she was the epitome of Western glamour. Howell Jones, ITN, Moscow.
Well, our royal correspondent, as you know, Nicholas Owen, is with me in the studio. Nicholas, just a sign there in Howell Jones' report of the global scale of this story. It's reverberating across the 4 corners of the world.
Yes, the princess was very widely travelled. Of course, as a leading member of the royal family, you would expect that. But since her divorce, she's travelled a lot as well. We've heard about her anti-landmine trips to Angola and Bosnia. She had a very busy programme coming up this autumn. She was going to go to Southeast Asia, Hong Kong. She was going to be the first member, I think I'm right, of the royal family to go there since the handover to China. So she was very, very well known many, many parts of the world, and even in the parts of the world that hadn't actually seen her. They read about her, they watched her on their TV news, and she was an incredibly familiar character. And, of course, you know, we keep repeating it. We heard earlier from Dr. Starkey, the historian there, about, you know, the sort of rather strange personality and that she could be dangerous and everything else. Well, I'm not sure whether Mr. Starkey ought to go saying that round Buckingham Palace gates at the moment. I mean, the fact is this country quite clearly feels very widely that we have lost somebody who was very widely loved, very widely regarded, very widely respected, whatever the sort of human frailties and failings and problems of that person.
OK, Nick, thanks very much indeed. Let's go straight now on my right to ITN's political editor, Michael Brunson. Mike, you've just come hot foot down from Mr. Blair's constituency, where you heard him make that very moving tribute to the Princess.
Well, indeed, we are all shattered by this, of course we are, but Mr. Blair is visibly shattered. He was told very early this morning, he was woken up first at 2 a.m. when the first news that something serious had happened. He then tried to go back to sleep and couldn't, and then as soon as the news hardened up, he began work with his officials and with his press secretary, drafting the necessary things that he would have to say. And he said them, and as we've been seeing through the day, I don't know quite how he got through that statement outside the little church, tiny little church in Trimdon, pouring with rain. And as he was speaking there was one of the villagers was standing behind him, and she was crying. She was openly overcome.
We could see that on the video.
And it was very moving. Now, frankly, he's got the even more harrowing job, in my view, of standing on the tarmac at Northolt Airport and seeing Diana's coffin coming off the plane, and that. I personally, and it's only a small comparison, I remember, for example, when the Duke of Windsor's coffin came back to RAF Benson long years ago, and I was one of those who was on the tarmac there. It is a dreadful moment. It is an absolutely dreadful moment. And so he will do that. Then this evening, he will go back to Chequers. The family are there. He will just spend a quiet evening at Chequers, and he will be coming back tomorrow morning with the family. They will try and resume normality tomorrow. The children will be going to school and so on. And he will simply be available. He has cancelled all his engagements tomorrow. He was due to see the TUC and the CBI. He has cancelled those. And I should add also that it is now confirmed that there will be no campaigning in the Scottish and Welsh referendums. Donald Dewar, the Scottish Secretary, has made that clear. Mr Hague has said that he will not be campaigning.
OK, Mike, it is some time since we heard that statement you were referring to from Mr Blair outside the church in Sedgefield. Let's just have a quick listen to that again.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her two sons, the two boys. Our hearts go out to them. We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us.
Mike, Mr Blair, they're clearly catching the mood of the nation.
He also went on to talk, I thought very movingly, about the way that we will always remember Princess Diana for the way that she could go to someone, he specifically said, the sick, the needy, the children, and just by a touch or by a smile, reassure them, comfort them. And Mr Blair particularly picked up on that point as he went on in that statement. And of course it's only a matter of weeks since they had a get-together at Chequers. It was an informal lunch that they had, and then after the lunch one of the princes was there also. The Prime Minister and Princess Diana had a long private chat about the way forward. So there's been, you know, they were thinking about the future, both of them. The Prime Minister feels very much that Princess Diana, despite all her personal troubles, had the opportunity to go forward and to, as he puts it, be a real asset for Britain, of the things she was beginning to do. He was firmly, I'm told, of the belief that she could forge a role for herself. She was beginning to do that, and that was what they discussed.
And she was firmly of the belief, specifically on this landmine campaign of her, that she was in tune with the government.
And there you saw the two ideas coming together. This was something that Diana wanted to pick up and run with, and of course it was something that the government very much wanted to do. Diana had got involved in this, as we know now, of course, in her remarks in Le Monde, critical of the last government. Well, be that as it may, the two things came together, and suddenly Prime Minister and Princess had something that they wanted to work on.
Now, Mike, what about this whole issue of privacy that's arising? Some pretty ill-formed ideas being floated around about do we need privacy laws, don't we? The French, of course, do have privacy.
Yes, well, of course, that is the irony in a sense, but of course the French privacy laws are on publication, and the problem is you can have all kinds of laws about what you may or may not publish, but how do you stop men on motorbikes chasing public figures? Now, it is because of that, you said the ill-formed ideas. We've been round the track with thoughts about legislation before. At the moment we have a tough voluntary code in this country, and I think it's fair to say that things have calmed down a bit, because I think, it was getting out of control in this country. But specifically to answer your point, the government's view very firmly is that this is not the time to rush ahead into any knee-jerk panic reaction. And Chris Smith, the Culture, Media and Sports Secretary, has made it very clear that he's not, as it were, going to suddenly tomorrow start issuing edicts or ideas about what's going to happen. Of course, everyone will think about it. The press itself has got to have enormous debate, got to have a lot of thought about this. The government will think about it. But for the moment, I think all our thoughts are going to be on the next few days and the coming funeral and so on.
Nick, you have a question.
There wasn't actually a question. I just wanted to pick up on what we were saying earlier about the sort of forgotten person in all this, a man who was injured and not too bad. We now understand ITN's been told he's not a Metropolitan Police officer. He is somebody who works for Mohammed Al-Fayed, that gentleman whose name we had a few moments ago is Rhys Jones, I think. His injuries are not life-threatening, and as we keep saying, we were saying a few moments ago, his evidence is going to be absolutely vital in all of this. But he was a bodyguard provided by the Al-Fayed family.
Indeed, a lot of information still to come out there. Just let me remind you that we've broken into your usual ITV programmes to continue our special coverage of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. A short while ago, Prince Charles collected her body from the hospital in Paris, where she died early this morning following a car crash, which also claimed the life of her friend Dodi Fayed and the driver of the car. Ben McCarthy has this report on the day's terrible events.
Having travelled from Balmoral, Prince Charles was met by the French President Jacques Chirac at the hospital where Diana died. Charles was also accompanied by the Princess of Wales' two sisters. They will return to Britain later with her body. The questions as to why the crash happened or how it happened remain unanswered, but this was the barely recognisable Mercedes limousine in which the Princess of Wales and her companion Dodi Al-Fayed were being driven back to his house. Witnesses have said the car was being pursued by photographers riding motorcycles. What is certain is that as he entered this tunnel alongside the River Seine, the driver lost control. The car span overturned and hit a pillar. Dodi Al-Fayed died instantly in the back seat. The driver was also killed. The princess, who'd been sitting alongside Dodi, suffered terrible chest injuries. At first, ambulance crews managed to keep her alive, but her heart had stopped beating by the time she was admitted to hospital. For 2 hours, surgeons battled to restart her heart, but at 4 a.m. Paris time, they admitted defeat. Britain's ambassador had been at her bedside.
The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends.
Near the scene of the accident, French police examined motorcycles allegedly used by photographers to chase the princess's car. The men who'd been riding them are still being held for questioning. The princess and Dodi Fayed had dined at the Ritz Hotel, owned by the Al-Fayed family. This was the route their driver took to escape the photographer's attention. As the road enters the tunnel, there's a sharp bend and a dip. This is where he lost control.
The car was just travelling at such speed, and it was almost as if it was in too high a gear. It really, really was tearing away. I don't know, maybe it was doing at least 80, maybe 100 miles an hour.
This morning, with the underpass reopened to traffic, police were still trying to piece together the last moments of what had been a romantic holiday for the princess and her friend. At the Salpêtrière Hospital, hundreds of ordinary people have been leaving flowers in memory of the princess. And in the past few minutes, the body of the Princess of Wales has been carried from the hospital, draped in the royal standard. The coffin will be accompanied by the Prince of Wales. It's now being driven to an airfield just south of Paris and flown back to Britain, where arrangements are being made for her funeral. Ben McCarthy, ITN.
Right, well, Mark Webster has been keeping abreast of the latest developments in our newsroom. Let's go to him now, Mark.
Yes, indeed, this has truly been the day when the world mourned Diana, Princess of Wales. I have some of the latest things in here talking about her charitable work and about her personality. Something from Help the Aged, a charity that she's worked with as patron for 10 years. Diana, said the Help the Aged director Michael Lake, brought happiness and encouragement to many disadvantaged older people in the UK and abroad. She gave physical comfort and encouragement to the lives of thousands of older people whom she met during her work for us. Her death will be mourned by old and young alike. He went on, during her patronage, our voluntary income quadrupled. Her personal magnetism, which was irresistible, crossed the barriers of age, race and creed and helped expand our work at home and across the world. And speaking of the world, King Hussein of Jordan has been the latest to send a telegram to the British royal family. The King voiced his deep shock and sorrow at the news of the untimely and tragic death of Princess Diana. He said, "Our hearts go out to you and to Prince William and Prince Harry. We pray to God that he gives you all the strength to accept his will." As I say, one of so many tributes to Diana, Princess of Wales, today.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Over now to Nicholas Owen, our royal correspondent. Nick, just looking back at the Princess's all too short life, she made a remarkable journey, didn't she, from being that 19-year-old shy Di, as she was then called,
Shy Di,
to
indeed,
this confident, outgoing woman that bestrode the world stage.
Yes, there was a lovely moment. Do you remember? I don't know, I hope people saw earlier in Carol Barnes's extended report about her life, when she was first approached by Carol as a young reporter then, and Carol was talking to her, and Lady Diana Spencer didn't want to speak to her. She was being very good, and then she suddenly said, "Oh, be careful." She was worried that the photographer was going to trip over a lamppost. That was the sort of thing. You know, and it had been reminded here, some information coming up about the first time she attended a Buckingham Palace garden party. They're pretty daunting events, I can tell you, just to go there, let alone to be sort of responsible for hosting them in any way. She was just celebrating her 20th birthday, very, very shy, and this makes the point that there was also a downpour. That's another feature of royal garden parties most of the time. How would she cope? What did she do? The young Diana, already well behind the others, as she insisted on speaking to virtually everyone in a wheelchair, lingering on her self-set task, soaked by the rain. You know, no sort of no pomposity about that. And this sort of set the tone. She was jolly shy. She found the whole thing jolly daunting, but she realised that other people actually found her shy too. Because after all, when any member of the royal family goes into a meeting with anybody, it doesn't matter who they are, everybody freezes and goes rigid and can't think what to say, and all the things you wanted to say you couldn't remember and everything else. So it takes a lot of skill to break the ice. You know, the Queen Mother has been doing it for 97 years. She's pretty good at it. But there was a girl of 20, learnt jolly quickly how to get over that by being just human, more or less by being herself. Over the years she had to get a hard shell to cope with the exigencies of royal life, the hard, difficult things of royal life, and then, some might say, an even a second shell when the marriage started to fall apart. But I think that's the sort of, you know, that's the human side of Diana. I never met anybody who said they had a bad brush with Diana in public. Behind the scenes, with her staff, yeah, there were rows, there was a bit of fury here and there. You know, I think there's an awful lot of people in an awful lot of walks of life who fall out with their staff, and people get sacked and people resign and march out. You know, you don't have to be the Princess of Wales to have that happen to you. But as far as the public was concerned, everybody she met, everybody she came into contact with the exception of the paparazzi, found her fantastically charming. And you know, how did she get like that? That I can't tell. You know, we had somebody from one of the charities earlier saying, not sure, was it in the genes? I don't know where it came from, but she was peerless at the duty that was set out for her.
As we're looking at that development that the Princess went through during her life as a royal, one thing that stood out, I thought, was the way she changed in terms of her public persona. Been much more confident. We are to tell, yes, this is A few moments ago, Prince Charles arriving at the small military airport outside Paris, where he landed after his flight from Aberdeen. That was the, there's the French police outriders. They're in an official car, not the Jaguar containing the Prince of Wales.
I don't know who that gentleman was.
Man on a phone.
Police car?
Presumably. There's the Prince's car. The Prince clearly visible there in the back.
More photographs.
The ever-present photographers.
And we looking there, we saw the hearse earlier, didn't we? Don't see it there.
I think the hearse was...
Oh, there it is.
There is the hearse containing the coffin containing the Princess of Wales' body.
Sunny, beautiful day in Paris.
They now make the short hop to RAF Northolt,
yes.
Whereas Mike Brunton was saying Tony Blair will be waiting to meet them.
We can return to the Paris pictures, apparently. Oh, here we are. We're going to see them, I think, roughly as we saw them before, perhaps. But yes, let's try and identify things a bit clearly. There's a police car with a blue light on. The Royal the Union flag, rather, on the British Embassy Jaguar. That's got Charles in it. Police car following close behind. Police outriders heading for Villa Coublay Military Airport.
There, the car just behind there, presumably containing the Princess of Wales sisters.
Yes, that's true. Of course, that's who that would be.
Right, let's go to Kensington Palace now. Our reporter Helen Wright is there. Helen, the flowers just been piling up there all day.
That's right. The flowers started arriving at 6 o'clock this morning at the gates you can see just behind me. The pile of flowers now stretches all the way along this pavement for about 60 feet and then snakes round the other side of a wall for about 80 feet. Up at the main gates of Kensington Palace within the gardens there are even more flowers. And now, sort of 11, 12 hours after we arrived here this morning, there are still people arriving. Still crowds gathered here, just want to be here on this day, to say they were here, to talk to other people, and just to sort of show their feelings on the day of this very tragic event.
Helen, thank you very much indeed. Well, Lady Diana Spencer, as was just 19 when the Prince of Wales announced their engagement in 1981, catapulting her onto the public stage, which she would never be able to leave. While her love affair with Charles appeared almost doomed from the start, her love affair with the British people blossomed. And it wasn't long before the shy, young woman found herself the most famous and most photographed face on the planet. Tim Wilcox has been looking back at her quite remarkable life.
She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. Radiantly happy and accompanied by her father, the 8th Earl Spencer, Diana bewitched not only the nation but the world. But the pressures of such a high-profile royal life were beginning to show. Diana was said to be suffering from postnatal depression here on this royal tour to Australia. There were rumours too that she was suffering from the slimmer's disease, anorexia nervosa, rumours that were dismissed by the palace. The royal roadshow continued, however, with Diana, now confident and fashion-conscious, taking the world by storm. In 1983, and Diana was becoming the world's #1 cover girl. And a year later, the princess with the fashion model looks gave birth to a second son, Prince Harry. With her children growing up, Diana immersed herself in charity work, taking on AIDS as one of her big causes, the princess helping to destigmatise the illness. But the marriage was beginning to fall apart, with the couple only seen together at times of national crisis. In private, they were leading separate lives. Then, in 1992, came the bombshell that was to destroy the myth of the happy royal marriage forever, with the publication of Diana, Her True Story by Andrew Morton. The couple continued to tour together, but it was obvious that the marriage was over.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
Diana vowed to continue with her charity work, But there soon followed a series of scandalous tape recordings featuring her and a male companion, then Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles. The final straw came when the paper published pictures of her working out in a gym. She decided enough was enough.
I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become.
The last few years of the marriage were marred by unhappy and very public declarations of marital unhappiness. First, Prince Charles admitted on TV that he'd been unfaithful. It was followed by Diana's admission of an affair with a former Guards officer, James Hewitt, who'd written a book about their affair.
Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him. But I was very let down.
Her divorce from Charles was announced a year later. Diana was to embark on life as a single woman, still a princess, but now able to pursue her dream of becoming a roving humanitarian, free from the constraints of Buckingham Palace. Tim Wilcox, ITN.
Well, we're going off the air in a couple of minutes. Before that, let's have a final thought from ITN's political editor, Michael Brunson, on today's momentous events.
A shattering day, I think, for all of us, but particularly a shattering day for our political leaders, whom I've been watching quite clearly. Tony Blair, desperately affected by this. The others making their tributes today. All campaigning in the Scottish and Welsh referendums is being suspended as a result. And just one final thought, that is, as Princess Diana increasingly turned to people like Mr. Major and Mr. Blair, I think it showed, in a sense, how desperately she wanted someone to help her, to guide her through this increasingly difficult life.
Mike, thank you very much. Well, in 20 minutes after programmes from your ITV region, we'll be back with a full roundup of the day's news. Then from 6:30 to 7:30, instead of the scheduled programme on ITV, Nicholas Owen and I will be here to report on the return to Britain of the body of the Princess of Wales. But before that, we end this part of our coverage with some of the most memorable images of the Princess. These are just some of the pictures which brought her to the attention of millions around the world and helped win her a special place in all of their hearts.
I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all. Life is mostly froth and bubble. Two things stand like stone: kindness in another's trouble, courage in your own.
This is London Weekend Television.
Good evening. A sense of disbelief.
As the coffin was removed from the hearse covered by the Royal Standard. 8 servicemen from the Royal Air Force carried it towards the... And our correspondent Robert Hall is in Paris now. Robert, we understand that a security detail who was in the car in which the Princess died is in hospital without life-threatening injuries, and so he may be able to give a fuller picture of what went on in the early hours of this morning.
Yes, indeed he may. We've been getting a bit more detail about Trevor Rees-Jones. He's a bodyguard employed by the Al Fayed family who was travelling in the front of that vehicle. He has, as you say, serious injuries, serious facial injuries. He's in intensive care. His family are with him, but no, he's not on the danger list. He may be able to give more detail about what has become a rather confused incident. We've got these reports, as you've heard, of press photographers on motorbikes, either behind or around that car. Other witnesses say they saw no bikes. We may not know any more until the French police either prefer charges or issue a further statement.
Robert, what about those people who we understand earlier today were arrested and are still being held in connection with this incident, those photographers on motorbikes?
Well, that's right. There were 7 photographers altogether, 6 French photographers, 1 Macedonian. They were questioned throughout the day. Reports this afternoon suggested that 3 of them had been released, 4 were still being held. Now, even if the French don't prefer charges of either involuntary manslaughter or manslaughter, there is a charge under a sort of so-called Good Samaritan law, where people can actually be indicted for failing to help people in danger. So they may not be out of danger yet.
Robert Hall in Paris, thank you very much. Princess Diana's most recent high-profile cause was, of course, her crusade to rid the world of landmines. It was a role which sometimes brought her into conflict with politicians, but the princess always insisted that her interest was purely humanitarian. Our Africa correspondent Steve Scott was in Angola when the princess visited that country.
Dressed down and ready for work, a princess swapping glamour for a new hands-on approach to her charity work. In January, she chose war-ravaged Angola to launch this fresh image and put her face behind the Red Cross landmines campaign. The victims she met had no idea who she was. They were just glad somebody was taking notice. They found her visit uplifting. And where others would have been embarrassed, the princess was completely at ease with the serious injuries confronting her. She was, though, quite clearly moved by many of the tragic stories she listened to. At the time, the princess described the trip as humbling, with the effect of hardening her stance against anti-personnel mines. Her visit made headlines worldwide, but also sparked criticism from some British MPs who blamed her for meddling in politics. Somewhat annoyed, the princess replied she was not a politician, but a humanitarian, always had been, always would be.
Firing.
The man who accompanied her in Angola said today her magic had an extraordinary effect.
When the Princess of Wales became involved, suddenly the interest escalated. Journalists who wrote articles about things nothing to do with landmines had to suddenly swat up on landmine issues and learn about the subject, get to know it, and report it. And we saw the reporting of landmines in some of the most obscure journals in the world.
Earlier this month, she took her campaign to Bosnia, taking time to talk to those, many of them children, whose lives have been shattered by the war there. As always, focusing on the youngsters to help publicise the devastation mines have caused and the threat they still pose. The princess knew she'd be followed wherever she went, so she decided to turn that to the advantage of tens of thousands across the world who are in no position to help themselves. Steve Scott, ITN.
Our correspondent Harry Smith is at Buckingham Palace. Harry, as we said, the body of the princess is on its way back to Britain now. What information can you give us about the funeral arrangements?
Well, there's been no announcement as yet. I'm told that there might be an announcement later tonight, more likely tomorrow. The main question, of course, is what kind of funeral the princess will be given. Normally, members of the royal family would have a full state funeral, but of course the Princess of Wales lost her title, Her Royal Highness, but the royal family must be acutely aware, as are most people in this country, that many, many people will want to pay their tribute to the princess. I'm told that the thinking at the moment seems to be that she will be given a national funeral, which might be a state funeral in all but name. Of course, then that could happen towards the end of next week, perhaps Friday. More likely, however, I'm told, the week after. That there is still, of course, the question of where she'll be buried. Normally, members of the royal family would be interred at St George's Chapel, Windsor. She could, however, be buried at the family home in Northamptonshire. But I think we've been given a very strong signal. It was a royal standard which was draped over her coffin as it left France. I think that's a clear indication that she will be given the full dignitary of a member of the royal family.
So, Harry, as you said, the possibility now of a funeral next week. Any indication of what happens between the arrival of the princess's body and the funeral?
I'm told it will arrive shortly at RAF Northolt. It'll then be taken, it'll arrive by plane, it'll then be taken to a private chapel. Thereafter, we've been given no indication of what will happen. As I say, we are waiting for word from Buckingham Palace. There is, as yet, no official announcement.
Harry Smith at Buckingham Palace, thank you very much. And that's the early evening news on the day the nation mourns the death of the Princess of Wales. I'll be back at 9 o'clock this evening with a special programme, and we'll be going back to the continuous news team for more live coverage shortly. But first, Lauren Taylor looks back at the life of Diana, Princess of Wales.
It was in February
this evening.
OK, Eric, thank you very much indeed. We will, of course, be returning to Northolt to bring you live coverage of that event. Well, the plane carrying the body of the Princess of Wales is in the air at the moment.
Yes, that's from Villa Coublay is the name of the military air base. And away she goes, containing it, was half an hour ago, containing the body of the princess. Away it goes, back to Britain. What a sad
amazing picture there as it goes past the setting sun.
Yes.
And as Eric McInnes was telling us, on board Prince Charles, Lady Jane Fellows and Sarah McCorquodale, the Princess of Wales sisters.
and of course the coffin draped with the royal standard. As Eric McInnes over at Northolt saying, this is being treated as a full royal occasion for the lady who, no longer HRH, that title she lost, but the Queen said she was to be regarded as a member of the royal family, and the events of the next week or so are going to prove, I think, that that is absolutely, fully the case.
The plane almost suspended in the air there. Well, about half an hour ago, the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, as we heard, flew into RAF Northolt to await the arrival of Prince Charles with the body of the Princess of Wales. There we have the Prime Minister